Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the ironclad, mud-caked boots of a medieval knight. The battlefield awaits, but don't worry, you won't be doing much actual fighting. You're too busy breathing through a helmet slit the size of a teabag string while your armour slowly welds you into a walking metal oven. Picture this dawn fog curling over a dew-drenched field, the distant clatter of hooves, the low hum of anticipation before a skirmish. You take a deep breath, but it smells like wet wool horse dung and someone's breakfast stew reheated over a campfire. You shift your weight and realise your legs feel like sausages stuffed in steel casings. And the battle hasn't even started yet. Let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a tent that smells like grease and damp leather. A young page is tightening the final straps on your cuirass while muttering under his breath, possibly a prayer, more likely curses. You try to nod solemnly, but the helmet shifts just enough to pinch your neck skin. Great start, your armour. Let's talk about it is a feat of engineering and masochism. Weighing in at roughly 50 to 60 pounds, it's distributed across your body in such a way that your range of motion is similar to that of a refrigerated ham. Your arms can swing, yes, but only in one direction, backwards. Not so much. As for bending down, good luck retrieving anything dropped under waist level. Historians still argue whether knights actually mounted horses without help, or if the squire had to act as a glorified stepstool every time. But despite the clanking and chafing you feel, heroic, briefly, until your foot catches on the tent flap, and you nearly collapse into the mud like a sack of armoured onions. Two other knights glance your way, but say nothing. Their silence says everything. You finally mount your horse with some help and a lot of grunting. The poor creature, bred for strength but not for subtlety, shifts nervously beneath your weight. Medieval war horses weren't the massive beasts of fantasy novels, but they were sturdy and surprisingly nimble. Yours, however, seems to have eaten too much barley and is currently working through a gas issue. The sun rises higher and your armour begins to heat up. You don't sweat so much as stew. Inside the helmet, it's humid dark and smells vaguely of last week's onions. You breathe through a tiny slit and your vision is reduced to whatever's directly in front of you. No peripheral awareness, no sense of the bigger picture. This is fine. You didn't need situational awareness, right? And then trumpets, or what passes for trumpets. They sound like someone is choking a goose into a pipe. The army begins to shuffle forward, a mix of anxious foot soldiers, mounted knights, and flag bearers with elaborate crests that flap dramatically in the breeze, except when it's not breezy, and they just droop awkwardly. You try to look inspiring. Your horse sneezes directly into your chest plate. The clanking of armour echoes all around, punctuated by grunts and the occasional yelp as someone steps on someone else's foot, or accidentally swings a mace into their neighbour's shield. This is not the efficient machine of military genius. This is more like an over-ambitious parade with anger issues. And let's not forget, the armour isn't custom fitted for comfort. Sure, it's forged to your measurements, but margins for error in the forge are measured in good enough units. If the greaves pinch your calves too bad, if the gorget scratches your collarbone, just layer more wool underneath and hope it doesn't breed lice. And lice are, yes, the silent army that marches with you. You've long since stopped itching. It's just part of the rhythm now. A little chafing under the armpits, some discomfort near the knees. A sensation like being gently sandpapered by iron hugs. As you wait for the signal to charge, or walk briskly, which is the more accurate term, you try to psych yourself up. You're a knight. You're brave. You're noble. You're also deeply aware that if you fall over, you may need 3 men and a pulley system to stand again, and falling. Very likely. Wet grass, loose stones. Someone else's sword dropped at the worst angle. Not to mention the terrifying reality that horses, while majestic, are also creatures with minds of their own. If yours decides that today's battle is not worth the hassle and simply refuses to trot well, good luck arguing with 200 pounds of muscle and mood. As you edge forward, your arm already aches from holding the lance upright. Your shoulder creaks ominously. You briefly consider retiring and opening a bakery. You've never baked, but the idea of warm bread and 0 stab wounds has a certain appeal. Still you march. The sky is blue. The birds are still singing for now. And your destiny, or at least a very unpleasant morning, lies just ahead. Your squire, let's call him Thomas, is 14, covered in freckles, and smells faintly of boiled cabbage. He's been your squire for 6 months, and despite his enthusiasm, he is precisely as helpful as a wet mitten in a sword fight. At the moment, Thomas is frantically patting your saddlebags. He's muttering half to himself, half to the sky, and he's looking for your gauntlet, the left one, the one he just had. You watch as he lifts a small pile of chainmail, shifts a bucket of arrows, then looks surprised to find your gauntlet, exactly where he left it, on top of your helmet, on your head. He chuckles nervously. You do not. Squires are technically in training to become knights themselves one day. In practice, they are part luggage handler, part personal assistant, and part medieval intern. They polish your armour, fetch your meals, care for your horse, and attempt to bandage minor wounds without vomiting. Historians still argue whether squires were considered true apprentices or simply underpaid children with strong backs. Thomas slides your gauntlet on with a satisfying clunk. There you are, sir, he says, beaming, like he's just solved a diplomatic crisis. You offer him a tired nod. Well done, you murmur, though you're fairly certain the gauntlet's on the wrong hand. The army begins to move again slowly. Horses clip-clop in uncertain rhythm, and foot soldiers shift in awkward clusters, trying to avoid stepping on one another or tripping on loose straps. You and Thomas have to shout over the commotion when he tries to hand you your lance and accidentally pokes a nearby knight in the eye slit of his helmet. There's a muffled curse, and you mutter an apology that sounds like he's new. You weren't much different at his age. Just smaller, a little more terrified, and equally bad at knots. The memory of your first campaign flickers through your mind, a cold morning nerves in your stomach, a sword you barely knew how to swing. You remember the squire you once were, and the knight who took a chance on you. He lost 3 fingers and a kneecap in that campaign, but he always said you were worth the trouble. You wonder if you'll be saying the same about Thomas someday, assuming either of you survive. Now that your armour is fully fastened and your gear somewhat sorted, it's time for the pep talk. Not from your commander, he's too busy yelling at a catapult, but from yourself. You steel your nerves, flex your fingers inside your gauntlets, and try to forget that Thomas mixed up your backup dagger with a spoon. This would be easier if your horse wasn't so jumpy. The beast named Roland after some long dead hero, who probably didn't kick his riders in the shin, is skittish at best. His ears flick every few seconds, catching the rise in tension, the clang of steel, the murmurs of men reciting prayers under their breath. Horses were trained for war, yes, but not every horse was born for it. And Roland, sweet though he may be, was probably meant for leisurely countryside rides and the occasional parade. The sun climbs higher, and you're starting to sweat again. Thomas hands you a water skin, then immediately apologises because it's half empty. You drink it anyway. The water is warm and slightly gritty, but you've had worse, like the time Thomas brought you broth in a helmet. It's efficient, he said. You said nothing. You were too busy spitting out parsley. You glance to your right and see another knight, older sterner, with a faded crest, and the look of someone who's seen far too many battles. He doesn't nod. He doesn't wave. He just adjusts his pauldrons, leans over his saddle, and lets out a sigh that sounds like a lifetime of disappointments, packed into one breath. You feel oddly comforted. Suddenly, there's a distant cry. A scout gallops past, shouting something you can't quite hear. A few moments later, your commander, the one who's still arguing with the catapult, waves a banner. It's the signal to advance. Everyone stiffens. You feel Thomas's hand pat your boot once his version of good luck. You want to say something meaningful. Something like, "Stay behind me," or "You've done well today." But instead your visor sticks halfway down, and all that comes out is gruff. He nods solemnly anyway. And so the column begins to move, slowly, haltingly, like a parade planned by committee. You bump along in your saddle. Thomas trots beside you for a few steps before peeling off toward the rear. That's where the squires stay far from the front lines, at least in theory. In practice, things go wrong fast in medieval warfare. Lines blur, rear becomes front, squires get pulled into the fray. You try not to think about it. You focus on the rhythm of your horse's gait, the metallic squeak of your own movement, and the way your left gauntlet, still on the wrong hand, keeps jabbing your thumb in just the wrong spot. Eventually you reach the staging field. The enemy is still some distance away, their formation a vague cluster of colour and steel across the hazy grassland. It could be 500 men, could be 2,000. Historians still argue about the accuracy of medieval army sizes, and honestly, standing here now, you understand why. You can barely count your own side without squinting. The sun glints off helms and halberds. The smell of oil and leather thickens. Someone coughs. Another prays. You tighten your grip on the lance, and then snap your stirrup leather gives out. You manage not to fall. Barely. You mutter a curse and hear Thomas's voice in your head. I thought that one looked frayed. The awkwardness of being a knight in battle isn't just the fighting, it's the parade of minor indignities that precede it. The misplaced glove, the sloshed water, the squeaky knee joint. And through it all the weight of everyone watching, everyone expecting you to be a symbol. A shining ideal. You shift in your saddle and whisper to no one in particular, I'm just trying not to die with spinach in my teeth. And somewhere far behind you, Thomas sneezes so loudly he startles two horses. You're now properly lined up on the battlefield facing the other army across a field that looks more like a churned up turnip patch than anything worthy of song. The wind stirs lightly, bringing with it the scent of damp earth horse sweat and something else, boiled onions. Maybe someone's cooking. Maybe someone's lunch exploded. You'll never know. The battlefield smells like chaos before chaos even begins. You glance left and right. Shields rise. Helmets glint. A banner flaps overhead, caught in an uneven breeze that can't decide which way it wants to go, like half your commander's strategies. Your lance wobbles in your grip, and you grip it tighter. Not too tight, or your fingers cramp. Not too loose, or you'll drop it like last time. You remind yourself that chivalry is all about poise under pressure, and right now that means not falling off your horse when it sneezes again. The noise is building. Metal clinks hooves. Stamp. Someone lets out a hearty battle cry that fizzles halfway through, probably realising he shouted too soon. Others mutter prayers. You start to join in, but your throat is dry. All you manage is a whisper. Please don't let me be the first to fall. It's a strange kind of stillness before the storm, not peaceful, just paused, as if everyone from the grizzled veterans to the brand new squires has realised simultaneously that they're about to spend the next half hour doing something deeply unpleasant, like taxes, but with more bleeding. The signal comes not a grand flourish, just a muddled shout and a banner waggle that could mean advance retreat or my arm is tired. Everyone interprets it as go so you do. Your horse surges forward, or rather it kind of lurches, then stumbles, then finds a rhythm that could generously be described as enthusiastic sideways trotting. It's less cinematic than you imagined. You bob in the saddle like a marionette armour, clanking out of sync with every step. Charging into battle should feel like poetry. Instead, it's an awkward mix of bouncing muttering and desperately trying not to drop your lance before you even make contact. You're not alone. Other knights wobble too. One drops his shield and has to circle back. Another accidentally elbows his horse in the ear, causing it to veer sharply left into a patch of surprised infantry. The whole formation ripples like a puddle hit by a rock. Elegance is nowhere to be found. The battlefield rushes toward you. Or maybe you're rushing toward it. Hard to tell. Your visor fogs again. You resist the urge to lift it. Last time you did, you got a face full of flying dirt. You see shapes ahead, men pikes flashing movement. You squint and lower your lance, hoping it's pointed the right direction. Training kicks in. Muscle memory. You aim not for glory, but for impact. You shout something, probably for honour, or for the king, but it might have been hold on, because suddenly, crack, your lance hits something, or someone. It splinters in your hand, a jolt running up your arm like you've punched a wall. You wobble, teeter, grip your saddle with your knees, and somehow, miraculously, stay upright. Others aren't so lucky. One knight to your right topples clean off his mount, landing with a thud that echoes even over the din. His horse continues without him clearly having second thoughts about this whole war thing. You grip the broken haft of your lance and pull your sword from its scabbard. It sticks halfway. Of course it does. You yank again. It finally comes free with a jerk that nearly dislocates your shoulder. Your grip is all wrong. Your elbow twinges, but you press forward. Now you're in the thick of it, close quarters chaos. You try swinging your sword, but there's no room, men, horses, shields everywhere. You awkwardly clink it off someone's helmet. They grunt and fall sideways. You can't tell if it was from your strike, or tripping over someone else's mace. There's mud flying, shouting, screaming. You see a banner fall, then rise again, then fall once more. No one knows what it means anymore. You hear a goat bleating in the distance. It might be symbolic. It might just be a very confused goat. You narrowly avoid a swinging flail. You turn your horse sharply slipping on a patch of mud and nearly losing your balance again. You're aware distantly that your visor has fogged up so completely you might as well be blindfolded. You lift it for a second, just long enough to see someone lose a boot mid-charge. It spins through the air like a sad leather bird. Historians still argue whether real medieval battles were this disorganised or if this was just a particularly bad day. But in your experience, things rarely go according to plan. There's too much noise, too many smells, and too many people yelling, conflicting orders to make anything look remotely elegant. Somewhere nearby, someone is calling for a retreat. Or reinforcements. Or raisins. Hard to tell. Your ears are ringing, and your nose is full of the battlefield's unique perfume sweat iron dirt and regret. You realise your sword is chipped. You don't remember hitting anything hard enough for that. You don't remember much at all. Time on the battlefield is elastic. It stretches and snaps, stretches and snaps, until you don't know if it's been 5 minutes or 5 hours. You pull your horse around and find yourself next to another Nunnite, helmet gone eyes wide, mouth open, in a kind of bewildered grimace. He nods at you. You nod back. You're both too tired to speak. And just like that, it slows. The enemy line breaks. Men scatter. Trumpets sound again, still goose-like, still annoying. You're not sure if it's a call to regroup, or a victory note. You don't care. You're still on your horse. You're still breathing. Your lance is gone. Your sword is dull. But you're upright, which by knightly standards is basically a win. You don't remember how you got here exactly. One moment you're in the thick of chaos, swinging at shadows and ducking reflexively at every shout. The next you're trotting slowly across a trampled field, the mud sucking at your horse's hooves, and the battle now nothing more than a murmur behind you. You look down and realise you've still got half a lance shaft in one hand and no idea where the rest went. You discard it with a shrug. Roland, your noble steed, snorts approvingly and walks on like he's done this 100 times. You pat his neck. He's earned it. Somewhere along the way your visor slipped up and you've forgotten to lower it again. The cool air on your face is the first good thing you've felt in hours. It smells faintly of moss and ash, with just a hint of victory, although that might just be the scent of singed banner cloth. You pass a fallen helmet half buried in a puddle. It's not yours, but for a moment you consider swapping yours has a suspicious dent near the temple, and smells distinctly of cabbage now. Maybe Thomas cleaned it with stew. Again. A squire jogs past, red-faced and panting, cradling someone's dropped mace like it's a newborn. He skids to a stop and stares at you, then scampers off again in the direction of a collapsed tent. You think you recognise him. You're not sure. All the squires look vaguely identical at this point, muddy underfed, and slightly panicked. The field stretches out around you, filled with staggering men and meandering horses. Here and there, a knight is trying to remount, one foot stuck in a stirrup, cursing gently as his leg armour creaks in protest. One poor fellow appears to be wrestling his own gauntlet, which is somehow stuck on both hands at once. You make a mental note not to laugh too loudly. Karma is always listening. You find yourself drifting toward the edge of the field, where a handful of other knights have gathered in an unintentional huddle. No one speaks for a while. A bird chirps. Someone coughs. Then from somewhere in the back, a voice mutters, "That went better than expected." This is met with a long collective grunt of exhausted agreement. A medieval battlefield is not a place for high fives. You slide off Roland and nearly collapse. Your legs tremble under the weight of fatigue and armour. Your knee buckles slightly. Someone catches your elbow. Another knight older, missing his visor, and one eyebrow. "Easy," he says. "You'll stiffen up like a roast duck if you don't walk it off. You do your best to walk it off." Each step sounds like someone emptying a toolbox down a stairwell. One of the younger knights drops onto a boulder and immediately regrets it. The clang his backside makes against the metal is audible 3 horses away. "Ow!" he mutters, as if surprised that sitting down in full armour on a rock was somehow uncomfortable. There's not much glory to be found here post-battle, just a lot of grunting, limping, and quietly checking whether that weird pain in your side is a bruise or just your belt digging in too hard. You glance down and realise one of your spurs is gone, probably lost in the mud. You decide not to tell Thomas. He'll just spend hours trying to find it, and right now you need him more focused on finding the food wagon. Speaking of food, you hear a distant clanging that might be a dinner bell or might just be someone kicking a pot. Either way, your stomach growls. It sounds like a dying toad. You make your way toward the makeshift camp that's forming just behind the field. Tents are being repitched. Horses are tied to anything that will hold. Men are unlacing greaves and wincing as their calves breathe fresh air for the first time in hours. One knight has simply flopped on his back arms wide, muttering "never again" to the sky. No one corrects him. They know he'll be back next week. You spot Thomas near a stack of crates trying to negotiate a cup of wine from an older servant who looks like she could crush him with a ladle. He catches your eye and runs over, sloshing a cup of something vaguely red and sticky. "You made it," he says, cheeks flushed. "I mean, I knew you would." "Of course." You nod. "Did you see my spur?" He glances down. Oh. Huh. No. Don't look now, you add, quickly. He freezes mid-turn. Just, if it turns up, great. If not, we'll say it was stolen by a goose. A goose? They're vicious. He nods solemnly. Of course. You take the cup and sip. It's wine, technically, more like fermented vinegar, with hints of berry and regret. But it's warm and sweet, and somehow makes the ache in your shoulders a little more distant. Someone nearby is tuning a lute. Badly. The melody wobbles, loses its footing, then recovers just in time to play the same 3 notes again. You listen amused. It's not a triumphant ballad, but it is oddly comforting. Like the battlefield has shifted from horror to humdrum in under an hour. Your commander strolls past, or rather limps with purpose. He's got a bandage on his head and a determined scowl. He shouts something about reforming lines and morning drills. Everyone pretends not to hear him. The evening falls in slowly, bringing with it a soft breeze and a settling silence. The battlefield is still there, just over the ridge, but here for now, it's just men undoing straps, loosening boots, and swapping stories they'll definitely exaggerate later. You sit, carefully. Your legs sigh in relief. Thomas offers you a piece of bread. It's hard enough to be classified as a weapon. You take a bite anyway. You glance at the firelight flickering on dented helmets and tired faces. You made it through another battle. Somehow. And as the stars begin to prick the darkening sky, you wonder quietly how many more turnip-scented battlefields lie ahead. You don't get much time to bask in your semi-survival. After a lukewarm dinner and a series of painful attempts to remove your leg armour without flipping over backward, you're already being nudged, gently, insistently, toward the next piece of nightly humiliation jousting practice. Yes, practice, after the real battle. You don't even bother asking why, because the answer is always some variation of discipline tradition, or because Sir Geoffrey's feeling smug again. Geoffrey is the one with the elaborate moustache, and a tendency to narrate his own moves as if he's in a romance epic. He's already mounted spinning his lance like a baton and calling out to arms brothers, even though you're just drilling in an open field, not charging into an enemy fortress. You sigh. Your thighs hurt in places you didn't know had nerves. But you mount up again because knights don't get breaks. Not for long, anyway. The practice field is just a patch of mostly flat dirt, outlined with rags on sticks and a few wooden dummies someone stabbed repeatedly. You line up opposite Geoffrey, who is adjusting his plume in a hand mirror. Your own plume fell off sometime yesterday, and Thomas tried to replace it with a chicken feather. You told him no. You might be tired, but you still have standards. Jousting is less elegant than people think. It's a clumsy dance of timing momentum and praying you don't hit the other guy too hard, or too soft, or worse, miss entirely, and hit his horse, which is a guaranteed invitation to a very stern conversation and possible exile from lunch. You ready your lance. Geoffrey winks at you. Try not to fall again, dear fellow, he says. You nod gravely. Try not to talk. The charge begins. You trot, then canter, then gallop. The lance vibrates in your grip. The wind whistles. Your visor falls halfway shut again, of course, and for a few blurry seconds you're aiming by instinct. And then, crack, contact. Your lance shatters on Geoffrey's shield. Splinters fly. He wobbles. You wobble. Roland snorts in protest. You manage to stay mounted, but just barely. When you pull up at the end of the pass, your shoulders numb, and Geoffrey is adjusting his arm like it's fallen asleep. He grins anyway. Splendid, he calls. One more round, you give him a thumbs up, and hope it looks like yes, and not my thumbs dislocated. Historians still argue whether knights jousted more in peacetime or wartime, but either way it was always more dangerous than it looked. Serious injuries were common. Even death, though, everyone preferred to call it a tragic accident involving valiant effort. The rest of the evening drags on in thumps and groans. You spar briefly with a younger knight who has more enthusiasm than aim, then get roped into hauling a wounded shield wall veteran out of a cart because the camp healer refuses to touch anything still steaming. By the time you're allowed to sit again, you're practically glued to the bench. Thomas brings you a hunk of bread, and what he insists is a pigeon pie. You suspect it's just old stew in a crust, but you're too tired to care. He also hands you a flask of something herbal that he swears will help your bruises. It smells like socks, you point out. That means it's working, he replies far too cheerfully. You drink it anyway. It does not work, but it does make your nose tingle, and now your breath smells like someone steeped a hedge. The night deepens. Fires flicker across the camp. Someone's snoring loudly enough to shake a nearby tent. Others are sharpening weapons, oiling armour, or just staring into the middle distance, thinking about whatever knights think about when they're not trying to survive family glory, or possibly just how much their knees ache. You stretch out your legs and rest your head against the log behind you. You think about writing a letter home, but the only parchment you have is damp and smells like roasted onions, and your ink froze last night. So instead you close your eyes for a bit. Not quite sleep, not quite alert. Just that in-between place where your body remembers every knock, fall, and clang from earlier in the day, but your mind can finally start to drift. You think about the lance strike, the way it connected, the way it didn't hurt until after. You think about the battle before that and how strange it is that the scariest part wasn't the enemy charge but the wait. That long, breathless moment before movement when anything might happen. You'd rather be bruised than afraid. Somewhere near your ear, Thomas is humming. It's off-key and tuneless, but somehow it fits the mood. He's polishing a buckle, pretending he knows what he's doing. You don't stop him. Knighthood isn't really about glory, you've decided. Not today. Not ever. It's about surviving long enough to keep telling the story. Even the dumb bits. Especially the dumb bits. And there are always dumb bits. Like when Sir Roland mistook a beehive for a helmet. Or when Lady Adeline's horse refused to fight, unless it was fed strawberries first. Or the time you got your sword stuck in a butter churn during a castle raid. You never lived that one down. They still call you Sir Dairy. You smile at the memory. A small one, but genuine. The stars are starting to peek through the clouds now. The wind has calmed. The smells of battle are fading, replaced by wood smoke and simmering stew and the faint earthy scent of crushed grass. You let yourself breathe. Not a triumphant breath, just a quiet one. And that's enough. You wake to the sound of distant shouting and something thudding rhythmically. For one glorious moment you think it might be the breakfast bell. It's not. It's a drum. A war drum. And someone is hitting it with the enthusiasm of a toddler on a sugar high. You blink at the dim sky, dawn again. How? You only just closed your eyes. Your neck is stiff, your shoulders ache like you've been headbutting trees, and you're pretty sure you slept with a rock embedded in your back. You shift and discover the rock is a piece of boiled leather. Who's unknown? Possibly yours. Possibly sentient by now. Thomas materializes at your side, clutching your greaves like they're sacred relics. Sir Morning drills, he chirps far too awake for someone who slept under a wagon with 2 goats and a bag of onions. You groan, quietly. Nightly groaning is supposed to be internal. You let Thomas help strap you in one piece at a time, while your joints remind you that you are no longer 20, or 30, or maybe even 40. You've stopped counting. There are only 2 times now before armour and after armour. The worst part isn't the armour, or the bruises, or even the occasional existential panic about the mortality rate of knights who own more bandages than land. No. The worst part is marching. Endless knee-grinding, back-pinching marching. You trudge in formation, the field dew soaking into your boots, while someone in the front yells about spacing and discipline of posture, whatever that means. You're fairly sure your posture is somewhere between tired grandfather and rusty scarecrow. The line of night snakes along a muddy trail bordered by hedges and gnarled trees. Birds chirp overhead, oblivious to your suffering. You envy them deeply. They don't wear chainmail, or carry swords, or need to find a socially acceptable way to relieve themselves in full armour. Which brings us to your current predicament. You need to pee. Badly. You glance around. Everyone's marching with a sort of grim determination, eyes ahead, minds blank. You try to discreetly veer toward a bush, but your sabaton, a fancy term for your armoured foot, snags on a root. You stumble. Recover. Keep walking. No privacy. No breaks. And your bladder has no concept of chivalry. You consider confiding in Thomas, but the last time you did, he told 3 other squires, and someone brought you a bucket as a joke. The bucket, by the way, now holds arrows, so you clench, and you march. You pass a shepherd and his sheep, just a guy, and his flock giving your armoured column the kind of judgmental stare usually reserved for bad minstrels and undercooked fish. You try to look regal. A sheep sneezes on your boot. You abandon the attempt. One knight near the front sings under his breath. It's off-key, but it passes the time. Others begin humming along gruff voices rising and falling with the uneven cadence of hooves and armour. It's oddly beautiful, like a choir made entirely of anvils and bored monks. Historians still argue whether medieval knights actually sang while marching, or whether this is just the romantic invention of later poets. But it feels real now. You hum too. It distracts you from the ache in your knees and the very urgent need for a bush. Finally, a break. Not officially declared, just one of those organic pauses where everyone pretends to tie something, inspect something, or lean very meaningfully on their swords. You take your chance. You shuffle off behind a tree, glance around, and begin the arduous process of relieving yourself without removing 12 layers of equipment. It's not elegant. It never is. But it is freeing. You return to the column lighter, and just in time to see Thomas arguing with another squire over a misplaced satchel. It had dried apples in it, Thomas insists, while the other boy claims it was definitely just beet peels. You interrupt with a single raised eyebrow. Thomas immediately pretends he was just rehearsing for a dramatic reenactment. "Sir," he says. "Shall we press on?" You nod, and the 2 of you rejoin the march. The rest of the morning blurs together. Mud complaints the occasional dropped shield, and one very unfortunate tumble when a knight's horse decides to sit down mid-path. No one speaks of it. The horse looks proud. The knight looks betrayed. By midday you've stopped pretending this is an honourable expedition. It's just walking. Loud, clanky, ankle-destroying walking. You've scuffed your greaves. You've sweat through your gambeson. And your helmet smells like someone tried to bake onions inside a tin bucket. At some point the group breaks again this time to let a wagon pass one piled high with turnips and a single goat riding smugly on top. You make eye contact with the goat. It bleats. You're not sure who won that exchange. Lunch is a piece of cold bread and something Thomas insists is pressed cheese. You're unconvinced. You chew it anyway, seated on a log that was definitely used by someone else 5 minutes ago. You don't ask questions. Nearby, 2 knights are debating battle techniques. One swears by the axe, the other insists on the flanged mace. Both agree that swords offer ceremony and that most fights are won with knees, elbows and luck. You nod quietly. They're not wrong. You remember one skirmish years ago when you knocked a man down with your helmet alone? You didn't mean to, you just tripped and landed forehead first into his stomach. He went down like a sack of eels. You were awarded a small ribbon for tactical impact. You kept it. As the sun begins to dip again, casting gold over the trees, you finally reach the next campsite. It's little more than a clearing with a few scattered fire pits and a very questionable looking pile of logs. You dismount with a grunt hand, Roland's reins to Thomas, and begin the slow, awkward process of removing your armour. Again. Your underclothes are soaked, your feet are sore, and your sense of dignity is currently buried under 3 layers of dust and regret. But you made it through the march. Barely. You slump beside a fire. Thomas starts fiddling with your shoulder plates, trying to buff out a dent with a piece of old bread. Don't waste that, you say. He eats the bread, keeps polishing with his sleeve. Do you think we'll march again tomorrow? He asks. You sigh. Deeply, almost certainly, he nods unfazed. At least it's not raining. The moment he says it, thunder rumbles on the horizon. You both look up. He winces. Sorry. You close your eyes. Just don't jinx the cheese next time. It's raining. Of course it is. Not a dramatic cinematic downpour, with lightning flashing against brooding skies. No. This is the other kind of rain, the slow, soaking drizzle that seeps into your soul, or at least into the lining of your boots. The kind that doesn't look like much until you realise your tent flap is sagging. Your blanket is damp, and your left armpit has developed a localised puddle. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is half a bowl of porridge that tastes suspiciously of candle wax. Thomas assures you it's oats. You're not convinced. You chew stoically while water drips from your nose into the bowl 1 drop at a time. So Thomas says, lifting the edge of your sagging tent they're calling the nights for rotation. You squint at him. Rotation guard duty. Perimeter shift. With the others. You stare at your porridge, then at the sky, then back at the porridge as if it might offer you an excuse. It doesn't. You sigh. Fine. Putting on armour in the rain is an experience best described as metal origami with added suffering. Everything sticks. Everything slips. At one point, you're fairly certain your greave is on backward, but fixing it would require removing half your leg and starting again so you leave it. Your chainmail tunic weighs at least 5 pounds more when wet. You squelch toward the tree line, feeling less like a majestic warrior, and more like an angry bell tied to a soaked scarecrow. Out at the edge of camp, the other knights are already assembling, damp, tired, and resentful. One is trying to keep his helmet dry with a piece of parchment. Another is arguing with a young sentry about whether he actually saw movement, or just imagined it. The sentry insists it was a shadowy figure. The knight says it was probably a cow. You take your place along the eastern path and stand still, very still, for a long time. Nothing happens. Except rain. After about half an hour, you realise you can't feel your toes. Do knights get trench foot, you mutter? Thomas, who has loyally followed with a small oilskin cover over his own shoulders, chirps. Only if they stand still too long, sir. Excellent. The perimeter patrol begins. You walk in circles. You see trees. More trees. A rabbit, possibly the same rabbit each time. At one point you think you see a figure in the distance, hooded, tall, but when you blink, it's gone. Historians still argue whether knights frequently encountered spies, or if most of those stories were just exaggerations to make guard duty seem heroic. You hope it was a hallucination. You're not really in the mood to fight a cloaked stranger in the mud right now. The rain lets up briefly, just long enough for you to remember what it feels like not to be squishing when you walk. You try to flex your neck, but your collar piece has fused to your gorget with damp friction, so you settle for a light shuffle and a prayer. You hear a branch snap somewhere ahead. You freeze. Everyone around you freezes. A rabbit bolts past. You all unfreeze. One knight coughs and mutters, "Stealthy devil." No one laughs, but several shoulders relax. As the shift ends, the next group of knights arrives, looking just as wet and unimpressed as you feel. You nod at them, with the solemn expression of a man who has just stared at the same 3 trees for 90 minutes and found no meaning in any of them. Back in camp, Thomas offers you a warm cloth for your face and a cup of something called fire tea. It tastes like burnt bark, but it's hot, and that's all that matters. You sit near the communal fire pit with a few other knights, watching sparks flick up into the damp air. No one talks much. You're too tired for stories. But someone passes around a flask, and someone else begins humming that same off-key tune from the march. The melody catches, and soon, without quite meaning to, you're all singing. Softly, drowsily. You realise with some surprise that you're content. Wet, cold, vaguely itchy, but content. This is your version of peace now. Soggy comrades, smoky warmth, and the kind of exhausted silence that feels earned. Then a voice breaks through the quiet. Sir Geoffrey, naturally. He's sitting on an overturned bucket, polishing a dagger, and telling anyone who'll listen about the time he single-handedly held a bridge against 40 rebels. The number increases each time he tells it. You're fairly sure it started at 7. You glance at Thomas. He's listening intently, eyes wide. You lean over. He once got stuck in a hay cart for 2 hours. Thomas's jaw drops. Really? He claims it was a tactical ambush. You both stifle a laugh, careful not to disturb the mood. Rain or not, mud or not, moments like these are precious. You've learnt to take them where you can. Dinner is soup, possibly. It has chunks. That's all you can say for sure. You eat it slowly, letting the heat loosen your aching jaw. You suspect you bit down too hard during the march, trying to keep your teeth from rattling. Later, as the rain stops for good, and a few stars dare to peek through the clouds, you stretch out under a canvas. Thomas strung up using rope and a broken pike. It's not perfect, but it keeps the worst of the damp away. Your limbs are sore. Your back is one large complaint. But you're alive. You fought. You marched. You guarded a very safe-looking tree line for longer than necessary. And now, finally, you rest. The fire crackles beside you. The other knights have mostly gone quiet. You hear the soft snoring of someone nearby and the rhythmic clatter of Thomas rearranging your gear for tomorrow. You close your eyes. You dream of dry socks. The sky is still dark when you wake, though it's technically morning. One of those bleary grey pre-dawns where the light filters in, like it's not sure it wants to commit. You're stiff. Of course, your left shoulder feels like it's been replaced with a bag of rocks, and your knees creak in harmony every time you shift. You stretch under the damp canvas, knocking a few droplets loose. One hits your forehead with precision sniper accuracy. You blink, sigh, pull the blanket also damp back over your chest for one last stolen moment of comfort. But naturally it doesn't last. Thomas appears bright-eyed, holding what can only be described as an optimistically toasted hunk of bread. "Morning, sir," he whispers. Today's forecast includes light skirmishes and continued humidity. You groan into your sleeve. He continues. "Also, the captain says we'll be sleeping in the field tonight. There's a hill he wants secured. Good vantage point. Bad drainage. Of course, you mutter. Wouldn't want dry boots." You sit up and begin the slow morning ritual armour on regrets tucked in dreams of retirement suppressed. Thomas helps you dress, though he spends most of the time telling you about a dream he had, involving a battle 3 pigs in helmets and a cart of honey. You nod at the appropriate intervals. Fully armoured, you mount up Roland, still as stoic as ever, and join the slow procession out of camp. The path is narrow and winding, bordered by brush, and the occasional startled squirrel. It's a few miles to the hill, and you spend most of the time trying not to think about how much wetter your socks will be by nightfall. Eventually you arrive. The hill is, as described, strategic, elevated, and basically a giant sponge. You dismount and squelch your way through the grass, assessing the lay of the land. It's defensible, sure, but only if the enemy has a deep fear of slipping. Camp is quickly and poorly assembled. Tents don't pitch well in soggy ground. Fires are stubborn. Every rope knot somehow loosens within minutes. You end up helping Thomas tie one by stepping on it while he wrestles it into submission. You both nearly fall over laughing. And then comes the patrol roster. You're assigned the night shift. Perfect. But before then, you've got the rest of the day to endure. And that means drills. Because nothing says nightly discipline like sparring in a marsh. You spend the next hour wading through a half-inch of mud, trying to land practice blows on Sir Cedric, who is both taller than you, and convinced that every match is a duel for honour. He swings dramatically. You deflect wearily. At one point, he quotes a poem mid-swing. You counter with a grunt that might have been nice verse. After practice, you stagger off to find lunch turnip stew again, this time with a bonus pebble for texture. You chew slowly, staring out at the landscape. It's oddly beautiful, in a damp, melancholy sort of way. Rolling hills, low clouds, birds, wheeling lazily overhead. A breeze carries the faint scent of rosemary, or possibly just Thomas's soap. He takes his hygiene surprisingly seriously for someone who once brushed his teeth with ale. The afternoon drifts by, with more patrols, minor scuffles with brambles, and a brief excitement when someone spots movement on the far ridge. Turns out to be a group of travelling merchants who quickly decide to turn around once they see your makeshift camp and everyone's general muddy vengeance vibe. You get a brief nap in before sunset, lying on your back, staring at the sky through a break in the canvas. The clouds are moving fast, layered, like old parchment. You trace them with your eyes until your lids grow heavy. Then, like clockwork, it's time for night duty. You trudge up the path with Thomas, who carries a lantern and an unnecessarily cheerful attitude. It's quiet, he says, swinging the light back and forth. Too quiet. That's because everyone's asleep. He nods solemnly. Yes. Suspicious. Your shift is uneventful, which is ideal. You walk slow, circuits of the hilltop armour. Creaking, boots squelching. Occasionally you hear an owl or a fox yipping far off. Once you think you hear a voice, but it turns out to be two knights snoring in perfect synchronization. You pause near a rocky outcrop to rest. The moon peeks through the clouds. The grass glistens. You sit, remove your gauntlets, and flex your aching fingers. Thomas hands you a piece of dried apple, which you chew in silence. Do you think we'll be here long, he asks, quietly. Depends. On what? How dramatic the commander's speeches get tomorrow. He snorts. We're doomed, then. You smile, just a little. The silence stretches soft and calm. You let it. Historians still argue whether knights really spent this much time on guard duty, or if that detail was exaggerated in chivalric romances. But in your experience, standing in the cold with numb feet and a lantern that keeps going out feels pretty accurate. By the time your shift ends, the camp is thick with fog. The fires have dimmed. You return to your tent, or what passes for one, and let Thomas handle the armour removal while you slump onto your pallet with a grunt. Your hands are scraped. Your thighs are bruised. Your eyes sting from the wind, but as you close them, lulled by the faint snores of your fellow knights and the gentle rustle of canvas above you, you feel something unexpected. Pride. Not the flashy trumpet blaring kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from showing up day after soggy day and still managing to be the one people count on when the lanterns flicker. You drift off, and dream of hilltops without mud. Morning comes not with birdsong or golden rays, but with the unmistakable sound of someone tripping over a cooking pot. A clanger splash and a loud wet curse echo across the camp. You blink awake to see Thomas peering in through the flap of your sagging tent. "They dropped the porridge," he says solemnly. "Of course they did." You roll onto your side and immediately regret it. Every muscle complains. Your back sounds like someone stepping on an old staircase. You sit up slowly, squinting at the weak light filtering through the mist. Everything is damp, still. Your boots squish as you slide them on. Your cloak smells faintly of onions and regret. You glance at your helmet and briefly consider leaving it behind. Then you remember today's schedule. Marching, again, not far just to the next ridge, but even a short march means strapping yourself back into full armour, hoisting your gear, and dragging your increasingly resentful body across a landscape that appears to be actively trying to eat your feet. Thomas, chipper as ever, has already laid out your gear in neat rows. Your gloves are drying on a stick over a fire. Your sword is freshly oiled. And miracle of miracles, he's managed to salvage 2 crusts of bread from the spilled porridge disaster. You chew them while standing. Sitting down feels like it would require too many decisions. Soon the column is moving again. The terrain today is muddier than usual, if that's even possible. Every step is an adventure in ankle-deep sludge. You feel your boot begin to come off with a soft slurp and clamp your foot down just in time. Around you, other knights are doing the same wobbling muttering, pretending they meant to stumble like that. Your horse Roland moves with stoic patience, as if he's long accepted that this is his life now, ferrying tired humans across increasingly soggy landscapes while dodging rocks and philosophical crises. Midway through the march you pass a tiny shrine tucked under a crooked tree. A few candles flicker beside it despite the wind. You don't know the saint, but you bow your head anyway. Thomas does too, making a quick sign with his fingers, one he insists wards off blisters and bad cheese. As the sun finally crests above the clouds, you crest the ridge and see the next valley below. It's fine, slightly less muddy, slightly more trees, slightly more ominous. The commander waves everyone into formation and begins a speech. Something about honour and terrain advantage and the nobility of mud-born courage. You stop listening after the third mention of our sacred duty. Instead you watch a crow hop along the branch of a nearby tree, completely uninterested in your noble suffering. You envy that crow. You wonder what it eats. Probably not turnip stew. Camp is set quickly. Tents pop up like lopsided mushrooms. Fires are coaxed into life using damp kindling and whispered threats. You dismount and stretch, or at least attempt to. Your spine pops like bubble wrap. Thomas brings you a cloth to wipe your face. It smells vaguely of mint. You give him a look. "I stole it from Sir Geoffrey's kit," he confesses. You pause. Does he know? No. He's busy reading poetry to his horse. Carry on. Lunch is more dried apples and something that might be cheese. Or soap. Hard to say. You chew it with grim determination. Then, without warning, a messenger arrives. Dusty, breathless, and very stressed looking, he rides straight into camp with a scroll bearing the royal seal. Everyone gathers, tension rising. A summons, a change in command, a reassignment to a nicer region with fewer leeches. Nope, it's a tax collection decree. Apparently the king has decided that all knights must now contribute an additional share of their campaign loot to the royal treasury. Never mind that you haven't looted anything in weeks. Or that the last thing you took was a bent arrowhead and half a spoon. Grumbling breaks out. One knight openly weeps. Another begins composing a sarcastic ballad. You simply sit down, unsling your helmet and murmur, "Of course." Why not historians still argue whether battlefield taxation was enforced strictly or simply used as a way for monarchs to remind their armies who was in charge. Either way, it's terrible timing, especially since you were just starting to feel slightly accomplished. Thomas perks up. Maybe if we all give spoons, they'll stop asking. You pat his shoulder. You're an optimist. Never lose that. Afternoon drills are cancelled, thankfully. Apparently someone set fire to the commander's tent, trying to dry his socks over an open flame. The resulting smoke is still curling upward, and no one is quite sure whether to laugh or salute. You take the unexpected free time to mend a strap on your scabbard. Thomas helps handing you tools while offering unsolicited advice about leather care. It's all about love and lard, he says. You try not to smile. He's not wrong. As dusk falls, the camp settles into that rarest of moods, quiet contentment. The fire crackles. Someone begins playing a lute, badly but not offensively. Knights chat in low tones, swapping stories and shared aches. The air smells of pine and smoke, with just a hint of burnt sock. You recline against your gear, letting your helmet rest beside you. Your hair is matted. Your back still hurts. But the stars are starting to peek out, and there's a sense, faint but real, that you've earned tonight's sleep. Thomas sits beside you, carefully sharpening a butter knife. Planning something, you ask. Just practicing, he says, grinning. Never know when you'll need to defend the stew. You chuckle, then close your eyes. You made it through another march, another meal, another royal disappointment. And that, you think, is the essence of knighthood. You wake to the sound of yelling. Not the usual kind, no trumpet, no mess, kit crashing. No overzealous knight quoting epic poems to motivate squires. No, this is the frantic overlapping kind. Urgent. Ragged. You sit up fast, too fast. Your spine pressed to your armour creaks in reply, and your left arm decides it needs a moment to join the rest of your body. Thomas is already at your side, wide-eyed and breathless. They saw movement. South edge, he says. Captain says to assemble. Immediately, you're already moving well, fumbling into gear. Greaves boots, sword belt helmet. The usual dance of buckles and mild curses. Thomas helps where he can, trying to tie a strap with one hand and balance your shield with the other. Out in the field, knights are mounting up in organised chaos. No actual attack yet, just a whole lot of speculation pointing, and horses getting annoyed at being saddled before sunrise. You squint into the grey haze. Fog rolls thick over the ridges, turning every tree into a maybe soldier, and every bush into a possible ambush. Scout your commander barks. Move now. Everyone else defensive positions. You and 3 others are chosen to ride out to verify and report, which is noble talk for go poke the fog and hope it doesn't poke back. You mount up Roland, snorting beneath you, clearly displeased with the lack of breakfast. You pat his neck. Just a stroll. Maybe a skirmish. No promises. Thomas offers a grim thumbs up and scurries off to fetch more bolts for the archers. You ride toward the ridge, the world narrowing into mist and muffled hoofbeats. The other scouts fan out, keeping just within earshot. You move slowly, hand on hilt, eyes darting between tree shadows and patches of suspiciously quiet undergrowth. Then a noise, small, sharp, metal on stone. You freeze, signal with a hand, everyone stops. You wait, nothing. And then a squirrel. It launches itself from a branch with such flair you nearly draw your sword. One of the other knights swears under his breath, another snickers. Tension releases like a breath held too long. Historians still argue whether early warning systems were reliable or if most alarms were in fact wildlife-related misunderstandings. You lean toward the latter. You continue forward past the grove until the fog begins to lift and the valley reveals itself. No enemies. Just a few startled deer and a very confused shepherd leading a group of goats through a field, that technically now counts as a military zone. You return to camp with the news no threat, just false alarm, and are immediately rewarded with more drills. Discipline must not slip, the commander says, ignoring the fact that half the unit is still trying to rub the sleep out of their eyes. You square up with Sir Marius, a solidly built knight whose idea of light sparring resembles siege warfare. He greets you with a nod, and then immediately whacks your shoulder hard enough to make your vision blur. "You okay?" he asks, mid-swing. Peachy you wheeze parrying as best you can. The bout ends when both of you collapse onto your backs, breathing heavily, and agreeing without speaking. That calling it a draw saves everyone's pride. Lunch is finally served finned soup with actual chunks of vegetable this time. Thomas claims that they're turnips. You suspect parsnips. Either way, it's warm, and you don't have to chase it with a spoon like that one time during the windstorm stew incident. Later, while re-strapping your greaves for the third time that day, you overhear two knights debating tactics. "I say we flank from the left," one insists. "The left's a cliff," the other replies. Exactly. They won't expect it. You decide to leave them to their genius. The afternoon is spent reinforcing the camp digging ditches, sharpening stakes, pretending the wall of wet logs counts as a barricade. Thomas helps pile rocks for the sling weapons, grunting like he's lifting a fallen castle. You give him a thumbs up. He flexes. And then, in a rare moment of calm, you find yourself alone at the edge of camp, looking out over the valley. The wind is still. The fog has cleared. The sky glows pale gold, brushed with soft clouds. You let yourself breathe deeply. The air is sharp and cold, but clean. For a brief moment, it feels like you're not wearing 40 pounds of damp regret strapped to your chest. A bird flutters past. A hawk, maybe? Or just a really confident pigeon? Either way, it's free. You envy it until you remember birds don't get soup. The moment is broken by the distant sound of someone slipping in the latrine trench. A splash, a yelp, followed by muffled laughter. You wince. That trench was dug deep. Thomas appears at your side with a flask of water and an enthusiastic report. "I fixed your helmet strap with fish gut. It was the only thing that didn't snap when wet. Acceptable." You take the flask, sip slowly, and watch as the sun begins its descent behind the hills. Evening comes, and with it the promise of rest. Tents go up. Fires are lit. Armour is unstrapped, oiled, and left to dry by flickering firelight. You remove your boots and peel off a sock with a sound so squishy even Thomas winces. Dinner is a meat stew. Actual meat. No one knows where it came from. No one asks. You eat. You stretch. You fall back into your blanket with a sigh. Tomorrow might bring marching. Or fighting. Or worse, another royal tax update. But tonight, you are warm-fed and only mildly bruised. And that is more than enough. You awaken to an eerie silence. No shouting, no clangs, no Thomas humming off-key while organising your socks by colour gradient. An actual thing he insists is essential to morale. Just quiet. Thick, heavy quiet. The kind that makes you suspicious. You sit up slowly, armour creaking in protest, and glance outside your tent flap. The camp is there, but muted. Knights moving in silence, voices low, eyes scanning the horizon. The kind of morning that whispers something's coming, but won't tell you what. Thomas appears like a ghost, offering your boots with an uncharacteristically serious expression. "Scouts spotted enemy movement," he says. "Same ones we didn't see the other day. This time, they saw us." You sigh and begin dressing. Helmet mail cloak. One greaves buckle snaps off and is replaced with a loop of twine. Good enough. By the time you emerge fully armed, a kind of order has emerged from the tension. Knights form ranks. Archers gather by the ridge. Your commander is pacing back and forth like a man who forgot where he left his sword and his dignity. You get the rundown quickly, possible attack by a smaller force, unsure numbers probably looking to test your defences. Which is hilarious, given that the defences consist of wet logs, 3 suspicious ditches, and a barricade made partially of stew barrels. You're assigned to the western edge of camp, overlooking a path lined with brambles and what may or may not be a defensive pit. Someone forgot to fill with anything useful. You take your place sword at your side, eyes scanning the trail. Behind you, Thomas stands ready with your backup shield and a bucket he claims is strategically filled with pebbles. You don't ask. Time crawls. You hear rustling once. Just a bird. Then again, closer. A snapped twig. A figure, no, just a deer. You exchange glances with the knight, beside you both, shrugging slightly. This is the 5th false alarm in an hour. Morale is restrained. And then the real thing. A shout from the ridge, arrows flying sharp, silent streaks in the morning air. Thuds of impact, shouts, chaos. You draw your sword. Across the ridge, figures emerge from the mist, lean fast in patchwork armour. Raiders, most likely. Not a full army, just enough to harass and steal whatever looks poorly tied down. Your kind of nightmare. They strike from the sides, not the front. Clever. Cowardly. Effective. You engage one who charges your flank, ducking under his swing and pushing forward with your shield. He stumbles more from mud than skill, but recovers fast. You clash blades twice before your elbow connects with his ribs and sends him tumbling backward into a ditch. You take a breath. Another comes at you. Your sword catches his steel screeching, and your feet slide dangerously in the slick grass. You lock eyes for a moment. Young, barely more than a boy. You hesitate a second too long. Thomas hits him in the back with the pebble bucket. He falls, groans, crawls away. You blink. Did you just weaponize breakfast? Thomas grins. Improvised tactics. The skirmish lasts 20 minutes, though it feels like hours. Eventually the raiders retreat, losing interest in your well-defended mud and vaguely hostile goats. Afterward the camp is quiet. Again this time with that strange hush that follows brief violence. You're scratched, sweaty, but whole. You sit beside the fire, drinking water that tastes vaguely of smoke, and watch as the archers collect arrows and squires patch gear. Sir Geoffrey is recounting the fight already, loudly. He claims he personally repelled 6 men and an angry mule. You suspect the mule repelled him. Thomas sits beside you, gently wrapping a bandage around your forearm. You okay? You nod. Did I help you saved me? And the bucket. He beams. Later, as the sky begins to soften into afternoon, you check in on the camp perimeter. The ditches are deeper now. The stew barrel wall is fortified with actual stakes. Someone's even propped a shield over the goat pen. You're not sure if that's tactical or just polite. You pass by the knights, who held the ridge trading nods and quiet respect. No songs, no speeches. Just that look, shared and understood, that says we're still here. One of them is whittling a stick into the shape of a bird. You watch for a moment. It's peaceful, unnecessary, beautiful. You walk on. Dinner is thick soup bread and some kind of smoked meat that you strongly suspect was part of last week's hunting accident. You eat it anyway. Afterward the mood lightens. Someone plays a tune on a pipe. So Cedric demonstrates how not to dodge a spear using a broomstick and ends up tangled in the laundry line. There is laughter. The best kind, tired, genuine, and unexpected. You lie down under the stars again, helmet off sword by your side. The sky is vast, quiet. Just a few flickering clouds and a moon that feels farther away than usual. Thomas is already snoring gently beside the fire. You close your eyes. The day was brutal. The fight real. The armour heavy. But you survived. Again. And tomorrow you'll do it all over. Because that's the job. That's knighthood. The next morning starts with the unsettling sensation of being watched. You open one eye and meet the gaze of a goat. It's chewing something thoughtfully and standing far too close for comfort. You blink at it, it blinks back. You blink again. It sneezes on your boots. Good morning, you mumble, sitting up and brushing goat-flavoured mist off your cloak. Thomas arrives moments later, holding what appears to be a breakfast stew and an urgent expression. Sir, the commander's called for an inspection. Full kit. Mounted. 10 minutes. You stare at him, then at the stew. Both he nods. Also someone moved your saddle. We're 90% sure it wasn't the goat. You eat quickly, if not happily, and begin the now well-rehearsed performance of getting dressed in a hurry while trying to look impressive. Gauntlets, check. Helmet slightly dented, sword sharp enough. Personality dry, but intact. Roland, loyal to a fault, is already saddled, though he eyes the approaching commander with a look of weary disdain only a warhorse can achieve. Inspection is as thrilling as expected, standing in a line, while a man with a clipboard you didn't even know. Those existed yet frowns at your boots. He taps a few hilts, adjusts a pauldron, grunts once, moves on. You pass. Barely. Thomas celebrates by offering you a small plum. For energy, he says, and general morale. The taste is slightly fermented, but the gesture is appreciated. Just when you think you might get to sit it, the orders change again. We ride, the captain announces. Reinforcements needed. Small garrison 2 valleys over. There's a general murmur of protest cut short by a glare. You mount up, suppressing a sigh. This is how it always goes, march, fight, rest, repeat. If you're lucky, not in that order. The ride is long and unremarkable fields, forests more dampness than should exist in a single ecosystem. At one point, you cross a bridge made entirely of tree trunks, lashed together with what you hope is rope, and not someone's discarded undergarments. You arrive by mid-afternoon at the outpost in question. It's a sad-looking affair. 3 crooked towers, 1 broken gate, and a lookout who greets you with a piece of bread in one hand and a chicken under the other arm. We were fine, he says, until the bandits stole the wheelbarrow. There's a pause. That's it, the commander asks. They also took a sack of oats, the lookout adds. You dismount. This was our emergency. Apparently, yes. But you're here now, and that means digging in. You're assigned to help fortify the gate, again, which involves moving wood, hammering things that don't want to be hammered, and pretending this post has strategic value. Thomas, ever the creative mind, suggests adding a second wall made entirely of barrels, for defence number for storage. But it might confuse the enemy. The rest of the day passes in sweat and splinters. You get a minor cut on your knuckle from a nail, and spend the next 10 minutes pretending it's not bothering you at all, even though it's throbbing like a miniature war drum. Dinner is better than expected. The garrison cook is an alchemist with lentils, and you actually manage to sit by a proper fire one with rocks arranged for seating, and not just a smouldering log someone tripped over. You trade stories with a few of the local guards, simple folk used to watching trees grow, and occasionally chasing foxes out of the granary. One of them has a surprisingly detailed opinion on shield shapes. Round for personality kite for drama, he insists. You agree mostly because your back is too sore to argue. After nightfall, you're placed on watch again. Of course. This time on the roof of one of the towers. The view is nice, miles of nothing, lit by starlight, and the occasional flicker of a distant campfire. You lean on the battlement's helmet off-arm saw, but mind clear. Thomas dozes nearby, wrapped in a blanket, cradling your backup sword like a teddy bear. It's oddly sweet. You don't have the heart to wake him. A gust of wind carries the smell of pine and you breathe it in deeply. Clean, cold, real. No enemies come, no alarms sound, just the creak of wood and the hum of distant insects. You let your mind wander back home, maybe. The sound of rain on a tiled roof, bread baking, the old dog who used to steal your gloves. A simpler time. You don't regret being a knight, but you do miss socks that aren't constantly damp. Eventually your shift ends. You wake Thomas gently nod to the next guard and climb down the tower with the grace of someone whose knees no longer recognise the concept of stairs. Your bed tonight is straw on stone. Not ideal, but not the worst. At least it's dry. You lie back, sword by your side, cloak pulled tight. The garrison sleeps. The stars twinkle. Somewhere a chicken clucks in its sleep. And you. You drift off, not with glory in your heart, but with the quiet knowledge that you've earned this rest. One peaceful night. For now. You're jolted awake by a rooster with a personal vendetta. It's perched somewhere just outside the tower window, shrieking its little lungs out like it's auditioning for the role of dawn itself. You groan, roll over, and consider for just a second adding rooster removal to your morning routine. Thomas is already awake, naturally. He's fiddling with your scabbard, muttering something about balance issues, and symmetry being essential to aesthetic fear. You're not entirely sure what that means, but he looks proud of himself, so you nod supportively. Breakfast is hot barley mush, and something that might once have been a plum. You eat slowly, savouring the warmth, and pretending your knees aren't plotting a coup. The garrison cook gives you a wink as she hands over your bowl. "Special batch today," she says. "Less gravel than usual." You thank her with the sincerity of a man who's eaten soup made from rainwater and shoe leather. Today's task, patrol the surrounding woods. Simple, right? Just a little ride through the trees. Fresh air, birds, possible bandits. You gear up slower than usual, thanks to a blister the size of a walnut on your heel, and mount Roland with a grunt. He snorts as if to say, "Again? Really?" The trail winds through the forest, soft and spongy with moss, dappled with sunlight. You lead a small group of 5 knights, and one incredibly enthusiastic garrison guard, named Elric, who insists on pointing out every mushroom you pass. That one's edible. That one's poisonous. That one might be a frog. You try not to encourage him, but he's somehow very endearing. The patrol is uneventful for the first few miles. Birds sing, squirrels dart through the branches. You even spot a small herd of deer, all of whom look at you like you've just interrupted a particularly dramatic woodland council meeting. Then a rustle. You freeze. The others do too. Elric raises his spear like it's a flag. Something's out there. You draw your sword, not dramatically, just enough to feel better. A shadow moves, a snap of a twig. You brace yourself, and out strolls a pig. A lone, muddy, unimpressed pig. It grunts eyes you all with majestic indifference, and trots off into the underbrush. The tension collapses like a flan in a thunderstorm. You exhale. One knight swears softly, another starts laughing. Elric looks disappointed. "I was hoping it was at least a wolf." "Nope," you say. "Just pork on patrol." Still, the encounter reminds everyone to stay alert. You press on deeper into the woods until you reach a small clearing with the remains of a campfire, charred logs, scattered ash, and a few footprints. Recent, not yours. Bandits, perhaps. Or travellers. Hard to tell. You dismount, inspect the scene. Nothing stolen. Nothing obviously left behind. But the fire was lit no more than a day ago. Historians still argue whether small outposts like this one were truly strategic or simply left alone because nobody else wanted them. You suspect the latter. You make a mental note, check in again tomorrow. Maybe set a few noisy traps. Maybe assign Elric to fungus detail. You ride back to the garrison by late afternoon. Everyone's tired. Even Roland drags his hooves a little. The forest was lovely, yes, but your back's screaming, and you're fairly certain your right pauldron is squeaking just to annoy you. Back in camp, Thomas greets you with a cup of cider and a concerned look. Any injuries, he asks. Only to my pride, and possibly my digestive system. He nods solemnly. I saved you some stew. You inspect it. It's greenish. Was that intentional, you ask? They added herbs. Ah, you eat anyway. Hunger trumps suspicion. Evening settles in. Fires glow. Someone plays a quiet tune on a flute. Not well, but gently. Peacefully. You sit on a log near the outer wall, staring out at the trees you just came from, wondering if the campfire watchers are still out there, wondering if they watched you walk past armoured and oblivious. Thomas joins you, handing over your helmet. He's polished it again, probably with something he wasn't supposed to use. Do you think he begins if you weren't a knight? What would you have been? You pause. Honestly, a baker. Really? Bread doesn't stab back. He laughs. I'd be a bard. But just the part where I get to wear feathers. You glance sideways. You already wear feathers. Ah, but I'd mean it. The fire crackles beside you. Smoke rises. The stars begin to flicker above, shy and blinking through drifting clouds. You close your eyes for a moment. Just long enough to drift, but not to sleep. The pig. The campfire. The silence of the woods. Something's coming. You can feel it. But not tonight. Tonight you rest. You've earned it. Again. The day begins with a letter. Well, more of a scroll, really. Delivered by a courier so young and enthusiastic, he nearly trips over your campfire trying to hand it over. The wax seal is familiar. The commander's mark hastily stamped and slightly smudged. You break it open with a sigh and begin reading. It's orders, of course. Not just for you, but for everyone. Your garrison stint is over. You're to return to the main force. Immediately. Apparently there's talk of an actual campaign forming, which usually means more marching, fewer warm meals, and a lot more speeches. You read it twice, then hand it to Thomas. He frowns, skims it, and then sighs. And here I was starting to like the tower. You pack quickly. No ceremony, no parades, just stuffing bedrolls into packs, strapping armour back onto limbs that thought they were getting a break, and waving goodbye to a guard tower that had become strangely familiar. Elric sees you off, holding a small mushroom, like a farewell bouquet. For luck, he says. Don't eat it. You nod solemnly. I won't. Probably. The road back to the main force winds through hills, then levels out into wide open plains. It's not a hard ride, just tedious. The kind of journey where your legs go numb from the saddle and your mind drifts. Thomas fills the silence with a running commentary, everything from, why are worms so long? Do you think knights ever had pets? You consider telling him about Sir Aldred and his famously aggressive duck, but decide to save that for a later morale boost. By midday, the sun's high and hot, turning your armour into a portable oven. You pull off your gauntlets and let your hands breathe. They're red sore and slightly trembling, not from fear, just from use. Like worn tools. You pass a traveller on foot, an old man with a cart of turnips and a sleeping dog riding shotgun. He tips his hat. You nod back. Roland snorts. By late afternoon you see the banners bright fluttering and slightly too clean to have seen real battle yet. You've found the army. The camp is massive. Tents in every direction, smoke rising from a dozen cook fires, the clang of smiths hammering armour into something vaguely useful. You dismount at the perimeter and hand Roland off to a stable boy who looks like he's still growing into his own boots. Inside the camp, everything is moving. Squires running messages, captains barking orders, smiths sharpening pikes and complaining loudly about the quality of local ore. You step over a sleeping mercenary sprawled in the middle of the road with a wine bottle for a pillow. You're ushered into a briefing tent where the commander, new this time younger, sharper bearded, lays out the plan. Something about a siege or maybe a blockade. He uses words like logistics and strategic choke points. You nod along, pretending not to notice that he's wearing a velvet doublet under his armour. Thomas fidgets beside you, clearly trying to sketch the map on a scrap of parchment without looking like he's doing it. His handwriting, you notice, is surprisingly elegant for someone who once tried to eat chalk. After the briefing, you're assigned to a new unit. Mostly familiar faces, a few new ones. Sir Geoffrey is here, unfortunately. He's already reciting a speech to anyone who'll listen. Something about destiny on the breeze. You take a wide path around him. You set up your tent near the outer ring of camp beneath a crooked tree. It's a good spot, quiet shaded, and far enough from the latrines to avoid the worst of the smell. As you hammer in the last steak, Thomas reappears with 2 bowls of stew and a look of cautious optimism. Thicker than usual, he says. Might even be meat. You sip. Pause. Definitely not meat. Root vegetable root. Ish. You eat anyway. At this point the taste is secondary to the warmth. Night falls slowly over the new camp. Fires glow across the plains. Laughter drifts through the air. Some forced, some real. You hear a lute somewhere, badly tuned but played with heart. You sit outside your tent helmet, off staring at the stars. They're the same stars as last week, last month. Constant. Indifferent. Thomas is sprawled nearby, polishing your shield and humming something tuneless. Do you think he says we'll win, whatever this is? You glance toward the command tents, then back at him. That depends on how many speeches we have to endure before it starts. He grins. Fair. The air cools. The wind picks up. You pull your cloak tighter, listening to the quiet settle back in. Back to the front. Back to waiting. Back to marching. The night's life on repeat. But for now, the fire is warm, the stars are out, and your boots are miraculously dry. That counts for something. The day before the siege feels wrong, not ominous, not dramatic, just quiet. Everyone knows what's coming. There's been enough talk of walls and rams and strategic posturing to fill a small book, but no one says it out loud. Instead, the camp moves in slow, careful loops. Armour gets double-checked. Blades are sharpened. Arrows are counted, recounted, then counted again by someone who's definitely not great at math. You're given command of a small advance group. Nothing fancy, just recon and preparation. A few knights, some archers, and Thomas, who has finally stopped trying to name your sword. He walks beside you as your unit heads out, rattling off facts about siege ladders. Did you know they used to soak them in vinegar to keep them from burning, he says, adjusting the straps on his pack. Doesn't work. Still smells awful. The fortress you're meant to scout is old stone bricks weathered by time, and probably at least 24 previous sieges. It sits on a hill, like a stubborn old man refusing to move from his porch. Even from a distance, it's clear this will not be easy. You circle through the underbrush, peering at the layout. High walls, one main gate, a few crumbled sections potential weak points. Archers visible on the battlements. No sign of sally doors or tunnels, but who knows what's hiding underneath. You take notes well. Thomas takes notes, and ride back as the sun starts to lower behind the hills. The evening camp buzzes with quiet tension. Some nights spar half-heartedly, others drink too fast. You retreat to your tent where Thomas is laying out your gear like he's arranging offerings to a very picky deity. He looks up as you enter. Boots polished, sword oiled, prayer whispered, all the usuals. You sit down beside him. Thanks. He fidgets. You think we'll be all right? You pause. It's not that you doubt your own skill or his. It's just that sieges are never fair. They drag. They grind. They break people in slow, wet, unspectacular ways. Glorious charges are rare. Most of it is waiting, starving, trying not to fall off a ladder. I think we're smart, you say. We know what to expect. He nods. It's enough. You lie back staring at the canvas roof of your tent, listening to the low rumble of voices, horses shifting, pots clanging. The sounds of 1,000 people trying not to imagine what tomorrow might bring. You fall asleep eventually, dreamlessly, thankfully, and wake, before dawn, to the horn call. Today's the day. You dress silently. Thomas helps tighten your van brace with hands that are steadier than they were a year ago. He's growing into this. Fast. Outside the world is still dim. Fog hugs the ground. The fortress looms in the distance, its stone walls lit by the pale gold of early sunlight. It looks less like a threat and more like an old puzzle, imposing but beatable. You mount Roland, whose mood is best described as begrudging cooperation, and ride toward the front lines. The siege begins not with a bang, but a shuffle, men hauling lumber carts of stones, barrels of pitch, engineers gesturing at scaffolding, archers taking position, ladders lined up like oversized toothpicks. Then the first volley. Arrows arc through the sky like a slow swarm. You raise your shield instinctively, though none come close yet. It's more for show, morale, theatre. The charge starts. Ladders, shouting, mud. You're not first up the wall. You're not foolish, but you are among the first wave. Shield raised, sword ready. Feet scrambling against stones slick with rain and regret. The top of the wall is chaos. Arrows, screams, shoves. You engage with the guard blades, clashing in a blow of metal and adrenaline. He's good, but you're better. Eventually, you push forward, shield-bashing boots slipping. You lose your footing once, catch yourself just in time. A brick grazes your cheek. Pain flares sharp and hot. You grit your teeth and keep going. Hours pass. Maybe more. Hard to say. The world narrows to stone-steel shouts. Then finally, there's space. The gate falls. Not with glory, not with cheers. Just a groan, a creak, a slow crumbling surrender. You stand inside the courtyard, armour, battered arms heavy. Around you, knights regroup. Squires gather the wounded. Thomas finds you, blood on his sleeve, eyes wide. You okay, he asks. You nod. He grins. I got to hit someone with a ladder rung. You sit. Right there on the stone. Because if you don't now, you might not be able to later. And as the sun breaks through the clouds, lighting the broken walls and the battered men beneath them, you take a long, slow breath. It's over. For now. The battle is behind you now. The smoke is thinning and the shouts have quieted into murmurs. The fortress lies still, its high walls casting long shadows as the sun sets. You sit beside the dying fire sword, resting across your lap. The dull ache in your arms finally starting to fade into something manageable. Thomas is nearby, curled under a blanket, his breathing slow and even. The camp around you has settled. Boots no longer stomp. Voices no longer bark. Just the low crackle of flames and the soft rustling of canvas in the breeze. You stretch out armour, now removed the earth cool beneath you. Above the stars appear one by one, slow, steady, eternal. A reminder that the world continues even after long days and heavier burdens. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of nightfall surround you. Each breath comes slower. Each sound dulls a little more. The scent of wood smoke and wet stone fills the air. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird sings low and lilting. You feel the weight of exhaustion, yes, but also the peace that comes after effort, the stillness earned by endurance. You're safe. You're warm. And for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, no one needs you to stand guard. No one's asking you to charge, or fight, or lead. Just rest. Let your thoughts drift. Let your muscles soften. Let the night carry you gently to sleep. The stars will keep watch tonight, and you'll be okay. Tonight, we're stepping quietly into the steam-filled kitchen of a medieval Korean household, somewhere around the late Goryeo or early Joseon period. The coals are glowing under a low clay hearth, iron kettles are murmuring gently, and the air smells of grain herbs and something deeply umami that you can't quite identify, but it's not unpleasant. There's a mother figure stirring a tall pot with rhythmic, deliberate movements, her robe sleeves tied back, her hair pinned into an elegant top knot. Someone in the next room coughs softly and rolls over on a mat. It's barely past dawn. And you're the new helper. No experience required, but you're about to find out that grinding grain with a stone mill at 5:30 a.m. is exactly as glamorous as it sounds. You probably won't survive this. Your day begins the way it always does in this household with juk. That's rice porridge ladled piping hot from a thick black pot into earthenware bowls. It's not exciting, but it's comforting. Soft savoury with just a hint of toasted sesame and a side of pickled radish to remind your palate that yes, flavour still exists. This morning's version is made with glutinous rice, finely shredded jujube, and pine nuts sprinkled lightly on top. Not because it's a special day, just because someone in the house is old enough to need extra softness and sweetness. Food was often tailored this way, toward age, season, even energy levels. Historians still argue whether this subtle nutritional tailoring came from Confucian principles, or simply from generations of extremely observant grandmothers. The rice is cooked in a sot, a heavy iron pot set into the agungi, a kind of open hearth built into the kitchen floor. Firewood is fed into the belly of this thing from below, and the radiant heat moves upward, warming both the pot and the surrounding kitchen stones. If you're lucky, you sit near it during winter. If you're unlucky, you stir it in August. Next to the juk, someone is steeping tea, but it's not the leafy green kind you might expect. This morning, it's bae sukcha, a gentle pear infusion, with ginger and a splash of honey simmered down until your whole mouth feels wrapped in a warm scarf. It's technically medicinal, but you don't complain. It makes your throat feel like velvet, and you haven't even said anything yet. The kitchen itself is small by modern standards, but full of quiet logic. Dried greens hang in bundles near the rafters. Perilla leaves, daikon stems, mugwort, clay crocks line one wall sealed tight with fabric and string. Some contain soy sauce, ganjang, others fermented soybean paste, doenjang, and a few hold things you're too new to ask about. One is humming, you're pretending it isn't. Breakfast is rarely eaten in silence, but it's never loud. The old uncle slurps thoughtfully. The youngest daughter hides radish bits under her rice. You sip slowly, watching the way steam rises from your bowl and curls into the rafters like it's trying to leave a message. Once the dishes are cleared, it's time to prep ingredients for lunch. You're handed a large radish and a knife roughly the size of your forearm. You glance at it. It glares back. No one says a word, but you know cubit too big, and someone will comment in a way that sounds polite but isn't. You work next to an older woman who moves with absolute economy, peeling, slicing, salting. She doesn't talk much, but when she does, it's always about food. What it cures. When it grows. Who dreamed about it last week? She's currently pickling mustard greens in salted rice water and explaining without emotion that pickles should be like guests, well preserved, interesting, and never overstaying their welcome. Out in the courtyard, the ongi jars, those big, breathing earthenware containers, are sunning themselves. They hold everything from chili-free kimchi to soybeans fermenting for winter sauces. And they're not just storage, they're guardians. The best kimchi, the best soy sauce, all require patience. And patience in this household is practically a seasoning. You head back into the kitchen, arms full of peeled root vegetables, and one rogue eggplant that tried to make a break for it. Someone's pounding rice in a stone mortar, turning it into a dough that will be filled with red bean paste and steamed into chewy rice cakes. You're warned not to touch them while they're hot, unless you want a second thumb. The day progresses with quiet movement like a current. Water is fetched from the well. Wood is split. Someone drops a basket of dried persimmons and curses poetically. You help scoop them up, learning that bruised fruit still makes good syrup. And throughout it all, the smells build in layers. Toasted grain steamed cabbage, the sharp bite of vinegar, and the slow perfume of ginger and garlic roasting gently over coals. Dinner will come later, and it will be impressive. But right now, this is the rhythm of a medieval Korean kitchen in its most ordinary moments. The slicing, the simmering, the occasional stolen plum. And as you lean against the warm stone of the hearth, your belly full of soft porridge and your hands dusted in rice flour, you begin to feel something odd. It's not hunger. It's not sleep. It's satisfaction. By late morning, the kitchen has taken on a different rhythm. The soft clink of ceramic jars being opened. The squish and scrape of stone weights being removed from lids. The distinct hiss of gas escaping as a clay crock of something fermented is cracked open. You wince. It's not unpleasant exactly, but it's the kind of smell that makes your nose wrinkle and your eyebrows reconsider their career paths. This is kimchi, but not as you know it. There are no chili flakes here. Not yet. Chili peppers won't arrive on the Korean peninsula for another few centuries, hitching a ride from the Americas via Portuguese traders. For now, the spice comes from other directions. Garlic, mustard seed fermented shrimp paste, and a liberal hand with aged soy brine. Today's batch is bake kimchi, literally white kimchi. No red colour, no heat. Just napa cabbage soaked in salt, then stuffed with slivers of radish, chestnut, jujube, and slices of fragrant Korean pear. It's mildly sweet, startlingly crunchy, and oddly refreshing, like someone decided to pickle a poem. You help prepare another batch, your hands slippery from the salted water, as the older auntie instructs you on proper stuffing technique. Be gentle, she says, but thorough, like folding a letter to someone you used to love. You don't know whether she's serious, but you nod solemnly. She has a point, though. Each cabbage half is split, soaked, drained, and then carefully layered with flavour. If you rush, the taste goes flat. Too much garlic, and it overpowers the pear. Not enough ginger, and it won't wake up your palate. It's a balance not just of flavour, but of texture and patience. The jars are then sealed and left on the veranda, where the crocks will quietly bubble and breathe for days, even weeks, depending on the season. In winter they may be buried in the earth to keep the fermentation slow and steady. In summer, they're shifted to the shadier side of the house. The kimchi is alive, and everyone treats it accordingly. You sit back and watch as a small boy sneaks a piece of freshly made nabak kimchi, the watery kind flavoured with thin slices of turnip and scallion. He slurps it like soup. No one stops him. It's good for digestion, they say. And character. Scholars still argue whether pre-chili kimchi was considered a main dish or a side. In practice, it was both, served in generous portions alongside rice and broth, or eaten alone in late afternoon, cold from the crocker bite that wakes you up even as it settles your stomach. You take a bite finally. The auntie gestures for you to try the batch you helped make. You chew slowly. It's tart, a little fizzy, and surprisingly mellow at first, until the mustard kicks in. Your eyes widen slightly. She grins. It's supposed to bite back. You nod. She's not wrong. Not all kimchi is cabbage, of course. You're soon handed long, thin, green onions, which are destined for pakimchi, a slinky, salty variant that drapes like noodles in your hand. There's also oi sabagi, cucumber, stuffed with chopped radish garlic, and today, thin slivers of dried seaweed. It's crunchy and fragrant, and makes your mouth water just from slicing it. The more experienced kitchen hands are working on something stronger. A fish-based kimchi made with small anchovies fermented longer and likely to cause heated arguments at the dinner table. Some swear by it, others hide it under rice. You're advised not to comment either way. Nearby a scribe with suspiciously clean hands is jotting down today's ingredients. He's not part of the kitchen. He's here to keep records for a household ledger, or perhaps even the royal food registry, which tracked what nobles and officials were served down to the amount of radish used per bowl. There's something oddly comforting about the idea that future scholars might one day debate whether this batch had enough pear. The kitchen starts to wind down around midday. The jars are sealed, the brine wiped from the tables, the cabbage leaves bundled and stored. You wash your hands in a wooden basin, watching the kimchi crocks lined up like sleepy soldiers, lids snug and satisfied. It's not glamorous work. It's not glamorous. No sizzling pans, no dramatic flames, just quiet labour. But there's something deeply noble about it. Kimchi isn't about instant satisfaction. It's about waiting, about transformation, about trusting that time, salt and air will turn a handful of humble ingredients into something extraordinary. Before you leave the prep table, you snag one last piece, just a corner of radish that fell from the stuffing bowl. It's crisp cold and slightly effervescent on your tongue. You chew slowly, imagining how it'll taste in a week, in a month, deep into winter, when the landscape turns white, and your bowl of rice feels lonely without something pickled to keep it company. As you head toward the back doorway, the old auntie pats your arm. You did well, she says, but don't get cocky. The kimchi decides when it's good, not you. You smile. Fair enough. Outside the jars are already starting their slow, invisible work. And inside your hands still smell like salt and garlic and pears. It's not a bad scent to carry with you. Afternoon begins not with hunger, but with curiosity. Because someone you possibly, a prankster scribe, has uncovered a tray of courtly confections meant for the evening ceremony, and they are dazzling. Small, glistening, symmetrical, and entirely too beautiful to be real food. You blink at them. One is shaped like a flower, another like a tiny jade turtle. They shimmer faintly under the openwork cover, and you get the sneaking suspicion that if you breathe too hard, they'll vanish. These are royal court snacks, and they are not messing around. The older cook, supervising the tray, sees your expression and chuckles. Don't be fooled, she says, lifting one delicately with silver chopsticks. They're sweet, but they bite your teeth if you're not careful. You lean in and realise they're not just sweets. They're sculptures. Some are made from pressed rice flour filled with red bean paste and honey. Others are fried to a delicate crisp, then dipped in rice syrup and coated with pine nuts or tiny flower petals. One shaped like a crane has a shimmer of actual gold leaf along its wingspan. That's not metaphorical either. Real gold, edible, barely. Flaky and dramatic, it's used sparingly not to impress guests, but to honour the divine. At least that's the official story. You suspect some noble families just really liked shiny things. The name for these snacks is hangwa, a broad term that includes fried doughs like yakgwa honey, cookies, jelly-like sweets from dried persimmons, and rice flour concoctions that are chewy, sticky, and far too pretty to eat quickly. They appear at weddings, festivals, ancestral rites, any time the stakes are high and the dessert needs to leave an impression. You're invited to help arrange a platter, carefully, using silver tongs. You fumble your first piece, a small spiral sweet, dusted in cinnamon, and someone gasps audibly. It bounces once on the tray, and somehow lands right side up. The entire kitchen exhales. You live to tong another day. There's a peculiar kind of etiquette to these snacks. You don't just eat them, you admire them first. You tilt the plate. You comment on the layers, the chew, the elegance of the press pattern. Some even whisper a blessing before biting in, though others skip straight to the sugar. One elderly woman passes you a bowl of siki, a rice-based drink that functions more like a dessert. It's made from malt water and boiled rice fermented until it tastes like sweet milky tea, with floating grains that stick to your teeth in the most inconveniently charming way. It's cold refreshing and dangerously addictive. You sip slowly, watching as the kitchen prepares the snack trays for delivery to the small palace pavilion. It's not a royal visit, not exactly just a minor noble with very expensive tastes, and a reputation for praising his sweets louder than his own children. The pressure is palpable. You help carry a tray out to the serving corridor. Along the way you pass several scribes taking notes, a monk murmuring over a tea bowl, and a cat who seems to be evaluating your posture. You adjust your grip. The tray wobbles. You adjust again. By the time you return, the sun has shifted. The kitchen is quieter now, resting between waves. A young cook is folding sweetened mung bean paste into soft rice cakes shaped like half moons. Another is preparing Dasyk pressed tea cookies made from chestnut powder and honey stamped with floral designs using hand-carved wooden moulds. Historians still argue whether the use of gold and flowers in Korean royal sweets was mainly spiritual or just decorative. Some believe the colours and patterns were coded symbols, joy, rebirth, harmony intended to reinforce Confucian values at the table. Others think the cooks were just flexing. Honestly, both theories feel right. You get to taste just one, a flower-shaped yakgwa glazed in honey and barely bigger than a walnut. It's sticky dense, slightly nutty with a soft snap at the centre. You chew slowly, letting the syrup melt across your tongue. It's like biting into a lullaby. If lullabies were fried. As clean-up begins, the cook from earlier nudges you with her elbow. "You've got sugar on your cheek," she says. You wipe. Miss. She sighs and does it for you. The rest of the confections are stored away in lacquered boxes with paper seals. You're told not to touch them. You promise nothing. One of them looks exactly like a tiny peach and smells faintly of ginger. Even the air feels sweeter now, tinged with roasted rice, fried flour, and honeyed pine. The kitchen returns to its rhythm. Porridge pots for the old radish broth for the sick, and a suspiciously large pile of red bean paste for something no one's telling you about yet. But for now you sit quietly on the edge of the courtyard, sipping the last of your shikye, and feeling just the tiniest bit royal. Late afternoon brings a shift in scent, out with honey and pine, in with something darker, nuttier, and more savoury. You follow your nose like a cartoon hound, drifting back toward the hearth, where a large iron pan is heating with intent. Not sizzling yet, just contemplating. A squat ceramic jug sits beside the fire, sweating lightly. Inside is sesame oil, dark, thick, and fragrant enough to haunt you forever if you spill it on your clothes. A cook uncorks it, pours a small ladleful into the pan, and you can practically hear the smell. This is where sesame oil takes centre stage. Used in nearly everything from soups to ceremonial rice balls, sesame oil in medieval Korea was more than just flavour. It was essence. Earthy, slightly bitter, deeply nutty, and if you used too much, you risked being politely asked never to cook again. But when used well, it turned bland dishes into memory makers. Tonight's dish is narmal, a general term for seasoned vegetables. You're handed a handful of blanched fern shoots, their earthy scent still clinging to your fingers, and told to season them like you mean it. That involves sesame oil, a pinch of salt, a hint of soy sauce, and just enough garlic to make your ancestors sit up straighter. There are other narmal bowls too: shredded, radish, lightly wilted spinach, thin slices of mushroom, and something suspiciously crunchy that the cook insists is edible root, not a bug. Probably. You mix, you toss, you taste, and immediately regret adding that second dash of soy sauce. The result is still edible, but if it had a personality, it'd be grumpy but fair. You try again. Less sauce, more oil. A sprinkle of toasted sesame seeds, which crackle faintly when dropped into the hot pan. This version sings. You plate it next to a small bowl of rice and a cup of miyeokguk, a seaweed soup traditionally eaten on birthdays and postpartum days. Today it's just dinner. The seaweed is soft and oceanic, the broth rich with beef, and yes, another drizzle of sesame oil. There's a reason this stuff shows up in almost every dish. It's shelf-stable, nutritious, fragrant enough to hide less than fresh vegetables. And in winter, when everything else is grey and cold, it makes food feel alive again. Next you watch a cook fry tofu, cut into thick squares, browned in sesame oil, then dipped in soy garlic glaze, and served with thinly sliced scallions. It smells so good that the monk from the tea room drifts over uninvited and lingers just a little too long. Nearby someone stirs a pot of juk again, but this time it's not breakfast. This version is hangover recovery soup, and while no one admits to needing it, everyone agrees to test it just in case. The sesame oil in this version is used sparingly, swirled into the rice gruel at the last moment with slices of abalone and a tiny splash of vinegar. You sneak a sip. It tastes like forgiveness. Historians still argue whether sesame oil was considered a luxury or a staple in medieval Korea. Some records suggest it was reserved for temple rituals and elite households. Others hint that small presses dotted the countryside, with local families grinding sesame seeds between millstones and hoarding their oil like liquid treasure. There's even a fringe theory that sesame oil was once used as lamp fuel in desperate times, though most cooks would rather eat in the dark than waste it that way. As evening falls, the oil is returned to its jug, sealed carefully, and stored inside a wooden cabinet, alongside bundles of dried seaweed and the suspiciously shaped root from earlier. You ask what it is. Decorative, the cook says. You do not believe her. Dinner is served quietly under the wooden beams of the long hall. Floor cushions are set out in neat rows. Rice bowls, namul, soup. A slab of tofu so golden you hesitate before biting in. You eat slowly, chewing each bite with intention, savouring the way the sesame clings to your tongue and coats your throat in warmth. There's no rush. No one's calling for clean-up yet. Outside, night stretches across the courtyard, stars peeking through thin clouds, a breeze stirring the paper lanterns. You sit back, hands resting on your knees, belly just full enough. Someone refills your cup with barley tea. It's earthy, a little bitter, perfect. You think about the sesame oil, the way it turned plain shoots into comfort food, the way it lingered in the soup, the way it made even hangover gruel taste like something your grandmother would have made while humming. You could get used to this. Not the bug roots, but definitely the oil. The sun has dipped below the ridgeline, casting the courtyard in a hazy indigo light. Shadows stretch long across the kitchen floor, flickering as someone pokes at the embers in the hearth. The cook lifts the heavy lid from a stone pot, releasing a lazy spiral of steam that smells of char broth and deep, slow cooked meat. Tonight they're roasting an ox. Well, not the whole thing, not here, and not in one piece. That would be a royal operation involving a fire pit the size of your bedroom and at least 6 men whose sole job is to yell at each other about firewood ratios. But the spirit of the thing is here slow-cooked, rich ceremonial, and heavy. This particular recipe, suyuk, means boiled meat, but don't let the name fool you. The preparation is meticulous. The beef, usually brisket or flank, is simmered with garlic green onion and ginger until it's tender enough to forget it ever had muscles. It's sliced thinly fanned out on a wooden board and served with dipping sauces that make your taste buds sit up straight. You're handed a plate. The meat glistens. There's a tangy chojang vinegar red pepper paste, a mild soy sesame blend, and something labelled only as ancestor sauce. You don't ask. The flavour is mellow. Not smoky, not spicy, just honest, meaty. As if the ox is quietly saying, "You're welcome," before it disappears into your stomach. Nearby, a pot of gomguk bubbles low over the fire. It's ox bone broth simmered until the bones surrender every bit of richness into the water. The resulting liquid is milky white collagen thick, and so savoury it makes your knees feel buttery. It's a dish with staying power, served hot in winter, ladled over noodles, sometimes just sipped plain from a bowl, like the world's most calming tea. There's no rush to eat. The elders chew slowly, sharing stories that may or may not be true. One involves a general who won a battle because he bribed enemy soldiers with beef. Another features a cow who allegedly outran a tiger and then became soup. You nod solemnly through both tales. In the background, a few assistants are working with jangteok, small patties made from mung beans, minced beef, and vegetables pan-fried in beef fat. They flip with satisfying sizzles, served with a side of sour radish salad to cut the richness. You eat 2, possibly 3. You stop counting after the second cup of rice wine. There's something theatrical about meat preparation in this context. It's not just sustenance, it's ritual. In larger homes or temples, the full ox roasting method involves burying the animal already prepped and marinated in a fire pit, lined with hot stones, covering it, with straw mats and layers of earth, then letting it slow cook underground for a full day. When uncovered, it steams like an ancient volcano offering peace. Historians still argue whether this method originated in Korea or was adapted from Mongolian influences during the Goryeo period. Either way, it became a symbol of feasting, used in royal banquets, religious offerings, and any celebration too big for boiled turnips alone. As you lean back, someone offers you a sliver of dried beef jerky, thin, chewy, marinated in soy and air, cured for days in a shaded hallway. It's sweet and salty, almost candied, and tastes like something you should be bartering with, not eating casually. Outside, the stars are out in force. A monk chants somewhere nearby, his voice weaving through the smoke and night breeze like a lullaby. You cradle a small bowl of bone broth and sip slowly. It coats your insides like wool. You're no longer hungry, but you don't want to stop. The final dish arrives quietly, a bowl of tteokbokki beef and radish stew, served in a small clay pot that holds heat like a dragon hoards treasure. You touch the sides. It's warm enough to double as a hand warmer. You eat slowly, quietly, letting the flavours fade one by one. Meat in medieval Korea wasn't daily fare. It was respected, shared, never wasted. Every cut had a use, every tendon, bone and scrap of fat. Meals like this weren't everyday things. They were memories, anchors. You set your bowl down, Exhale. It's a good night to be full. After a night of rich broths and ox-simmered satisfaction, the kitchen shifts tone the next morning. Lighter hands, brighter flavours, and baskets of foraged greenery start to appear by the door, still dewy from the early morning mist. Someone has returned from the hills with a woven pack of wild herbs, and mountain shoots fiddlehead, ferns, dandelion leaves, garlic chives, and an assortment of things that definitely look like weeds, but smell suspiciously delicious. The kitchen murmurs approval. You roll up your sleeves, because today's menu leans into the green. Not salad green, not smoothie green. Earthy bitter, medicinal green. Welcome to the world of Nummel again, but now with a side of botany and just a pinch of philosophical brooding. The first herb you're handed is suck mugwort. Aromatic, slightly bitter, used in everything from soups to pancakes to occasionally banishing spirits. You blanch it briefly, then rinse it in cold water and season it with sesame oil, salt and a delicate splash of chojang. The result is surprisingly complex, like spinach that read a lot of poetry. Nearby someone is sorting Gosari fernbrake. It's coiled like a little fiddle and must be boiled, soaked and seasoned with oil, garlic and soy sauce to coax out its flavour. It's chewy, earthy and mildly woody, like something a forest would offer you after a long hike. Then comes Minari water dropwort, fresh, crunchy, a little peppery. In modern times, it's the star of Korean seafood stews, but here in the Goryeo kitchen, it's chopped finely and mixed with thinly sliced radish and vinegar dressing. The taste is bright, almost lemony, like a late spring breeze on your tongue. You work beside a teenage boy who insists on describing every plant's texture in poetic terms. This one, he says, holding up a slippery green stalk, feels like a tired eel. You blink. Okay. The cook supervising gives him a look, but doesn't correct him. Maybe he's not wrong. As the mountain greens are prepped, the kitchen makes space for another dish, John's savoury vegetable pancakes. Today's version is made with chopped scallions, thin garlic chives, and you guessed it, a generous heap of dandelion leaves. The batter is poured in ladlefuls onto a hot stone griddle, sizzling into crisp-edged discs that smell like spring and success. You flip one. It tears slightly. Confidence, the cook says. Flip like you mean it. You try again. Better. You're rewarded with a hot pancake straight from the pan dipped into a light soy vinegar sauce. You take a bite. It's crisp on the outside, tender in the middle, and surprisingly satisfying for something that contains no meat, no sugar, and possibly a few items that technically count as lawn clippings. Healthy food, the boy says, makes you strong enough to carry regret. You decide not to unpack that one. As lunch approaches, bowls of seasoned herbs are placed on the side table in neat rows. Each one looks similar, yet tastes entirely different. Pungent garlic chives, cooling wild mint, smoky fern shoots. You sample one bite at a time, letting the flavours linger and overlap. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on wild greens in Korean cooking stemmed from necessity or preference. Some suggest it was the result of Buddhist influence and food scarcity in mountainous regions. Others believe it was a philosophical ideal, living in harmony with the land eating what nature offers in each season. Whatever the reason these dishes hold up, you pause to help hang bundles of unused greens to dry in the rafters. Later they'll be crumbled into soups or brewed into teas for winter. Nothing goes to waste. Not even that one stalk of root you mistook for firewood yesterday. You're handed a mug of warm dandelion tea. It's bitter, but in a clean, bracing kind of way. Like an herbal slap that says, "Wake up, you have intestines." By mid-afternoon, the kitchen is quieter. A few older cooks are kneeling near the hearth, slowly pounding boiled greens with a wooden pestle to make chwinamul doenjang, a paste of wild leaves and fermented soybean, that will be smeared on warm rice and topped with slices of cucumber. The smell is earthy, funky, intimate. You eat a bowl. It tastes like everything you've smelled all day, wrapped in warmth and a little mystery. Out in the courtyard, a woman is braiding long strands of garlic chives and hanging them like ropes from the beams. The sun hits them just so, and the air fills with a heady, sweet, sharp aroma that makes you feel oddly awake. You sit on a low bench with your mug of tea, watching shadows lengthen and a single petal from a nearby blossom drift onto your plate. You don't brush it away. It feels like it belongs. Today's meal was not rich, not indulgent, but it left you full in that quiet, humming way that good food always does. Not just in the belly, in the bones. The afternoon light tilts golden brushing over the dark ceramic jars that line the courtyard wall like squat wise elders. Each one sealed with a fabric lid, each one harbouring secrets older than most trees you've seen today. You already know not to mess with them, but curiosity is a powerful thing. These jars, ongi, are the silent heart of the kitchen, and inside them lives the soul of medieval Korean flavoured jang. That single syllable covers an entire family of fermented condiments: doenjang soybean paste, ganjang soy sauce, and gochujang, red pepper paste, though not yet in this particular kitchen era. You're about to meet the first two up close. The cook hands you a long wooden ladle and gestures toward one of the larger jars. Doenjang, she says. Breathe slowly. You open the lid. It's like being hit in the face with umami, funky, salty, deeply earthy. If soup had a basement, this is what it would smell like. You dip the ladle in and lift out a chunk of thick dark paste speckled with crushed soybeans. Doenjang is what happens when soybeans are boiled, mashed, formed into bricks meju, dried in the air, and then left to ferment for months in brine. The resulting flavour is powerful, bold, slightly aggressive in the best way. It's stirred into soups like doenjang guk, spread on vegetables or used as a base for sauces that make even plain rice taste interesting. You're invited to taste some. You hesitate. The cook shrugs. You've eaten worse. She's not wrong. The paste hits your tongue like a story that starts mid-sentence. Salty, funky, a little bit like aged cheese that once had dreams of being soup. But the finish, pure satisfaction, deep, comforting, like an old friend who never left town. Next comes ganjang soy sauce. Not the dark supermarket kind you're used to, but a lighter, more delicate cousin. This is what's left after the soybean bricks ferment in brine, and the liquid is drained and aged. It's thin, fragrant, salty with a whisper of sweetness. Poured over rice stirred into broth, or used to glaze vegetables. You help pour some into a small earthen bowl. The sunlight hits it just right, and it glows amber. You dip a slice of cucumber into it and take a bite. Clean, sharp, like the sound of a temple bell in your mouth. The fermentation process itself is a lesson in patience. After forming the soybean bricks, they're tied with rice straw and hung to dry. The straw carries the right microbes, nature's little helpers, and helps create the right kind of mould. It sounds terrible. It tastes divine. The meiju bricks are then placed into jars of brine where they sit for months. The solids become doenjang. The liquid becomes ganjang. The jars breathe through their porous clay, letting just enough air in to keep the microbes happy. And every day someone comes by, lifts the lid, sniffs deeply, and mutters something like, "Still angry," or "Getting friendlier." Historians still argue whether this fermentation process was an imported technique or a homegrown marvel of culinary science. Some trace its origins to Chinese influence during the Han dynasty. Others insist the Koreans had been fermenting things long before that, just not writing it down. Either way, by the Goryeo and early Joseon periods, Jang had become more than a flavour, it was a foundation. You couldn't cook without it. You wouldn't want to. Even Buddhist temple kitchens, famously strict and onion-averse, relied on doenjang and ganjang to bring depth to their vegetarian broths and stir-fried greens. It was protein, it was salt, it was soul and the jars. They were as carefully tended as livestock. They needed the right sunlight, the right breeze, covered but not smothered, coddled but not fussed over. Too much humidity and the paste could sour. Too much sun and it could crack. It was an art form, a relationship. Back inside, someone is preparing doenjang jigai, a rich stew made with the paste tofu squash mushrooms and a dash of green chili. You hover too close and are handed a spoon. The broth is thick and complex, with a flavour that clings to your teeth like an opinionated elder. You go back for seconds. There's also a plate of cucumbers and radishes, thinly sliced and dabbed with a doenjang-based dipping sauce that includes sesame oil and a whisper of vinegar. You eat them like chips. You are not judged. As the dinner settles into place, you help close the lids on the jars outside. One still warm from the sun gives off a low glorp sound as it exhales. You pat it gently. Same. The cook grins. Give it a few more weeks, she says. It'll be perfect. You nod. Some things just need time and a little salt. The evening air settles in cool and damp, brushing across the kitchen stones like silk soaked in tea. Everything seems to exhale at once, the coals, the cooks, even the pottery. But just when you think the day is winding down, a small party of visitors arrives from the nearby monastery. Monks. And not the silent kind. They're here for one thing, boribap. You blink. Barley rice, yes, but not just that. A steaming wooden tub of cooked barley is placed on the floor. It's slightly nutty, a little chewy, and whispering the subtle aroma of field and sun. Next to it, an array of bowls, dozens of them, each one holding a different topping. This isn't just dinner, it's edible choreography. You help arrange the bowls seasoned, spinach, blanched, bean sprouts, stir-fried mushrooms, thin cucumber ribbons, gosari, fern, shoots, spicy radish kimchi, thin slices of tofu, crushed perilla seeds, and a dollop of... There it is again, doenjang. The monks don't ask for meat, nor do they need it. This meal is about balance. Variety. A little of everything arranged like petals on a plate. And once the bowls are in place, they begin assembling their own personal masterpieces, scooping rice and toppings into wide bronze bowls, swirling in a spoonful of chili paste or soy sauce and mixing with quiet reverence. You try it too. Your mix is heavy on perilla seeds and cucumber with a generous splash of barley tea to help it all glide down. It's earthy, textured, and absurdly comforting, like a grainy lullaby. A young monk tells you the word boribap means barley rice, but also humble sharing. The dish was traditionally eaten during leaner months when rice was scarce and barley more plentiful. But it evolved into a kind of social food, a meal that invites participation, customization, and slow appreciation. Historians still argue whether boribap was more common in temple kitchens or farming households. Some claim it began as peasant fare, while others insist its balance of flavours and nutrients aligned perfectly with Buddhist dietary principles. Either way, it's delicious, and likely healthier than anything you've eaten in a week. One elderly monk eats with his eyes closed, chewing each bite, like he's reading a poem written in barley. Another insists you try adding a spoon of pickled mustard leaf. You do. It adds a zing that practically throws open your sinuses and shakes your shoulders. To drink there's bori-cha barley tea, roasted barley simmered in water until the liquid turns golden brown and tastes like warm, slightly burnt toast in the best way possible. It's caffeine-free, soul-heavy, served warm in winter and cold in summer. You sip from a clay cup and immediately feel more virtuous. The conversation meanders. One monk describes the quiet beauty of morning fog. Another asks if you've ever seen a dog sneeze itself awake. You haven't. He demonstrates. It's a surprisingly accurate impression. A plate of Kim-toasted seaweed circulates the table. Paper-thin sheets brushed with sesame oil and salt, then crisped over open flame. You wrap a bit of barley rice in one, pop it in your mouth and pause. It's like eating the sea if the sea also baked bread. By now, the bowls are mostly empty. The barley tub scraped clean. A few monks are yawning into their sleeves. One has quietly dozed off, with a hand still cupping his tea. You help gather the bowls, rinse them in warm water, and stack them with soft clinks on the low wooden shelves. The stone floor is warm beneath your feet. Someone opens a window, letting in the scent of pine and night air. The cook catches your eye and nods toward the last bowl of toppings, a mix of seasoned sprouts and pickled squash. For you, she says. You take the bowl, sit by the door, and eat slowly, watching the moon rise behind the trees. It's not a feast, but it's perfect. Morning returns with a soft clang, the unmistakable sound of ladles hitting iron pans. And today, something exciting is on the menu: pancakes. But not your familiar, maple-drenched breakfast variety. No, these are Korean jeon, savoury, sizzling, and versatile enough to make even the pickiest noble nod in approval. They are humble but slyly indulgent, often filled with what the kitchen has on hand: leeks, mung beans, bits of tofu, or slices of root vegetables. Some versions even walk a sweet, salty tightrope, confusing just enough taste buds to keep things interesting. You're handed a bowl of batter and a bundle of scallions still damp from their early morning wash. The batter is simple flour water salt, but there's a trick to getting it the right consistency. Too thick, and your pancake turns into a doughy pillow. Too thin, and it will spread like gossip on a windy day. You slice the scallions lengthwise, lay them neatly in the pan like green noodles, and ladle the batter over top. A splash of sesame oil, a dash of confidence, and then sizzle. The smell is instant nostalgia, even if you've never been here before. Your first flip is cautious, your second, bold. Your third lands the pancake halfway on the floor. The cook sighs and picks it up with a practiced flick, as if reminding the food who's in charge. There's more than one type of jeon, of course. Pajeon is scallion heavy chewy at the edges. Bindateok is heartier, made from ground mung beans, kimchi, and occasionally minced pork, all fried into dense golden cakes. And hwajeon. That's a flour pancake, small, sweet, and decorated with real petals. It's like eating a botanical painting if that painting had a little honey glaze. Today someone's making all three. You're handed a bindateok straight from the pan. It's hot crisp and smells of garlic bean and history. You dip it into a soy vinegar sauce and take a bite. It crunches at the edges, then gives way to a soft centre that tastes like warm honesty. You consider asking for 3 more. Pancakes weren't just comfort food, they were ceremonial too. Offered at ancestral rites, served during seasonal festivals, and even used in wedding rituals. A perfectly round golden pancake symbolised harmony and abundance, though you suspect it also symbolised a cook who'd mastered the art of not burning things. Historians still argue whether certain types of jeon originated in royal kitchens or among commoners. Some claim the richer versions filled with beef or fish were favoured by nobles, while simpler leek and radish styles were common household fare. But either way, they were a staple across the peninsula, portable, shareable, and adaptable. A young girl wanders through the kitchen with a tray of hwajeon, each one adorned with pressed chrysanthemum petals. You hesitate, unsure if it's meant for actual eating, or a tea ceremony involving moonlight and metaphors. She grins and pops one in her mouth. "Eat it," she says, "or the flowers will be sad." You eat one. It's subtly sweet with a chewy texture and floral aftertaste that lingers like a soft off echo. You suspect she's right. By mid-morning, the pancake station is in full swing. One corner is turning out Gamja John potato pancakes, grated finely seasoned, lightly, and pan-fried until the edges lace into delicate crisp webs. Another pan sizzle with tiny oyster pancakes, the shellfish folded into batter, with sliced scallions, and topped with chili threads. You taste your way through each version like a very lazy inspector. Each bite tells a different story. Market stalls in coastal towns, temple kitchens, high in the mountains, royal feasts where every ingredient had to be documented, praised and politely nibbled in order of importance. And perhaps most fun of all, Gion often came with rice wine. You sip a shallow cup of makgeolli, a cloudy, slightly fizzy drink made from fermented rice. It's tangy, a little sweet, and cuts through the oil like a cheeky joke. It pairs perfectly with pancake, possibly too perfectly. You settle on the back steps, a warm pancake in one hand, tea in the other, and watch as a breeze rustles through the kitchen. A few pancake scraps are tossed to the courtyard birds, who hop excitedly, their feathers fluffed with delight. You're full again, but there's always room for one more Gion, especially when it's flower-shaped, and smiling at you. Lunch arrives with fanfare, or at least with clinking dishes, and the distant thrum of someone practicing the zither badly. Today's meal is not a humble one. You're about to witness a spectacle of precision ritual and polite excess the royal surasang. Literally king's table. It's not a single dish, it's a layout, a stage, a fully choreographed edible performance involving anywhere from 9 to 12 side dishes, soup stew, rice kimchi, and at least one item no one can identify but everyone politely praises. You're not the king, obviously, but someone decided you should help set the table. The tray you carry holds pickled garlic cucumber slices carved into fans, and a dish of steamed egg custard so smooth it reflects your face, like a tiny quivering mirror. You try not to breathe too hard near it. Each component of the surasang has its place. Soup goes to the left, stew to the right, rice in front, kimchi slightly behind as if it's eavesdropping. Banchan's side dishes form a semicircle like loyal retainers. And the centrepiece, usually grilled fish braised short ribs or a plate of seasonal greens arranged like calligraphy. The cook supervising you hums softly while placing pickled lotus root onto porcelain. It's translucent and rings of pink tart, slightly sweet, with the crunch of a very well-organised vegetable. You learn that the number of dishes wasn't just culinary, it was political. More dishes equals more importance. The king got the full spread, crown prince slightly fewer. Important guests depends on how well they bowed. The wrong number of side dishes could be a subtle insult, or worse bureaucratic chaos. Today's mock surasang is for a visiting scholar who once translated the Book of Rites backward just for fun. He wears thick robes and an expression that says, "I haven't chewed anything solid in 3 days." You're told he likes his radish aged at his kimchi unspiced, and his soup temperature lukewarm, but emotionally warm. You take careful notes. The stew is galbijim, braised short ribs, in soy sauce garlic, and dates cooked until they slide off the bone with a sigh. The soup is teokguk, a delicate rice cake broth, traditionally served on New Year's, but acceptable today because the rice cakes were cut into perfect coins. You sneak a taste of japchae stir-fried glass noodles with spinach mushrooms and sesame oil. It's sweet, savoury and slippery, the kind of dish that tries to escape your chopsticks while winking. You lose 3 bites before one lands properly. Next up, huang po muk, A bright yellow mung bean jelly, sliced into rectangles and topped with soy sauce and seaweed flakes. It looks like tofu's extroverted cousin. The taste is clean bouncy and oddly elegant. One dish holds dried persimmons stuffed with walnuts and pine nuts. Another has pickled perilla leaves folded like letters from someone who smells faintly of anise. The cook pours barley tea for the scholar, then steps back. The room stills. He lifts a slice of tofu, tastes, nods. Everyone breathes again. Historians still argue whether the surasang was more about feeding or impressing. Some say the elaborate arrangement reflects the Confucian ideals of balance and order. Others note that kings often had so many dishes they barely touched half. It was less about hunger, more about performance. Even the bowls mattered. Bronze porcelain and lacquered wood were chosen not just for durability, but for their role in temperature and presentation. A hot soup in a bronze bowl holds heat. Pickled radish in wood keeps it crisp. As the scholar eats slowly murmuring approval, you sit at the side table with a simpler version of the meal. A few narmal, a bowl of rice and a ladle of the same stew. You eat with the quiet thrill of having earned your place here, surrounded by food too elegant to speak above a whisper. You finish with siki again, the sweet rice drink from before chilled and garnished with a pine nut floating like a lonely boat. This time you let it linger on your tongue. As the dishes are cleared, the cook turns to you and says, "Next time you carry the soup," you agree, because today you got the noodles. And the noodles were excellent. Late afternoon creeps in with a syrupy calm. The kitchen settles, not quite sleepy, but moving at half speed, spoons scraping gently water, simmering in the background. Someone humming a tune that has no name and never needed one. That's when the drinks start appearing. Not the wine, though, that may come later, but the other kind. The cosy, curious beverages that make medieval Korean cuisine feel like a warm conversation with an herbalist. You're handed a tiny porcelain cup with something golden inside. It swirls thickly, smells like ginger and pear. You take a sip, sojongwa, a traditional cinnamon punch served cold. It's made by boiling cinnamon sticks and dried persimmons with a few slices of ginger, then chilling it all until the flavours mellow into something between a spiced cider and a dessert you forgot to chew. It's sweet, but not cloying. Warming, but chilled. You could drink it all day. Next comes besukka, a pear steamed with honey, black pepper, and sometimes a dash of pine nuts. It was a medicinal treat, often prescribed for coughs or to soothe the heart. You cradle your own little pear still warm in its dish and scoop out a bite. It tastes like a hug wearing a scarf. Historians still argue whether basuk was primarily used in royal households or passed down through the village recipes. Some evidence shows it appearing in medical texts. Others claim it was just a smart way to use up wrinkly pears. Either way it works. You feel better already. Further down the table, someone pours Amija Cha 5-flavour berry tea. The berries are soaked in water until the liquid blushes pink, and hints of sour, sweet, bitter, salty and spicy all tickle the tongue like a confused choir. You sip. You pause. You sip again. You're not sure if it tastes like fruit or philosophy, but it's oddly addictive. Beside it is Daichu Cha Jujube tea. Dark, slightly syrupy, brewed from dried red dates. It smells like something ancient and trustworthy. You drink it and feel approximately 3% wiser. A child waddles past carrying a bowl of hyunmi cha brown rice tea. She offers you some, grinning toothlessly. It's roasted and toasty with a flavour like the memory of popcorn. Not flashy, but deeply grounding. Then there's Matsul pine needle wine, brewed in the spring, from fresh needles and a touch of yeast. You don't try it today, it's still fermenting in a dark corner, covered with a cloth, and the kind of quiet that warns, don't peek. But you're told it has a crisp, foresty taste, that makes you feel like you just walked through a rain-washed mountain. The drinks keep coming. Mysil char plum tea, ginger broth with jujubes, even barley tea made from the same grains as this morning's rice. Each one has its own mood, its own backstory, its own little superstition. This one warms your belly. That one clears your mind. Another is meant to improve complexion, if you believe in such things. You don't need dessert, after all that. But you're offered one anyway. It's a bowl of Yolt malt toffee, stretched into chewy ribbons, sometimes rolled with sesame or crushed nuts. It sticks to your teeth, your lips, your better judgment. The cook winks and tells you to chew slowly or risk dreaming of sticky things all night. There's also Gotgam Mari dried persimmons stuffed with walnuts rolled into sweet salty spirals and chilled until just firm. You take one bite and suddenly understand why ancient poets wrote verses about fruit. One monk insists on closing the meal with honey water. Just that warm water with a spoonful of honey and a drop of fermented rice wine. You think it sounds too simple. You try it anyway. It's perfect. Historians note that Korean drinks of the medieval period weren't just about taste. They were extensions of medicine, hospitality and mood setting. Every sip carried intent to heal, to cool, to warm, to impress, to soothe. You sit under the eaves with your final cup of barley tea. The sun glows low in the sky. The dishes have been cleared. The kitchen hums with post-meal energy, soft and warm. You hold your cup in both hands. It's not about the drink. It's about the moment. And this one is just right. Twilight melts into the horizon like a brushstroke in diluted ink, and with it, the kitchen's focus returns to its roots, literally. Tonight the menu wanders away from royal feasts and temple tables. It heads into the fields along dirt paths, past barley rows and mossy stone walls, until it finds itself in the humble, hungry heart of a countryside home. The fire is already going when you return. A large iron pot balances over it, like a cauldron preparing to tell secrets. Inside, acorn jelly. Yes, acorn. Not in a squirrel-foraged woodland fantasy way, but as dotorimuk, a firm translucent jelly made by leaching acorns, grinding them into flour, and slowly cooking until it thickens into brown cubes that wobble slightly when you poke them. You poke one, it wobbles. Then a plate of dotorimuk muchim appears, the jelly sliced, drizzled in soy sauce, sesame oil, garlic, and green onion. The result is cool, nutty and soft, a kind of rural tofu that tastes of tree bark in the best way possible. It's surprisingly filling. Someone hands you a bowl of boribap, again, this time topped with radish leaves, a dab of jang, and a sprinkling of perilla seeds. The grains are rougher than before, the toppings less arranged, but somehow the flavours feel more complete. You chew slowly, each bite, a small thank you to the field it came from. Now a pot of gamjajuk is being stirred. That's potato porridge, mashed thickened with starch, and seasoned with salt, and the occasional spoonful of kimchi brine. It's hearty and pale, and tastes like recovery. The kind of food someone gives you when you've lost a bit too much of yourself to the cold. You sit beside an old woman who has just finished making mandu dumplings, pinched closed with knobby fingers and filled with cabbage, tofu, garlic, and sometimes mung bean noodles. They steam gently in a cloth-lined basket. She insists you eat 2, then 3. You lose count around 5. These aren't the delicate folds of royal dumplings. These are peasant dumplings, thick, generous, slightly uneven, and cooked with more instinct than recipe. A small child watches you eat and offers a handful of dried barley snacks, puffed, toasted and lightly sweetened with syrup. You crunch them between your teeth and realise they taste like breakfast cereal from a gentler era. Next, someone brings narration bap scorched rice, scraped from the bottom of the pot, steeped in hot water, to make a kind of tea soup hybrid. It's smoky soft and oddly addictive. You keep sipping it even though it looks like leftovers pretending to be a drink. Historians still argue whether scorched rice was intentional or simply a byproduct of cooking over fire. What's agreed upon is this: in a time before snacks came in packaging, Nurian bap was beloved. Eaten as a treat, offered to guests, even packed on journeys in dried sheets that could be rehydrated on the road. And then there's maisaengi guk, a soup made from green seaweed so fine and thread-like it looks like watery silk. Slippery, salty and slightly sweet, it clings to your spoon like an affectionate ghost. The taste is briny, soft and cleansing. Someone leans over and tells you it's good for your bones. You believe them. There's no fancy plating here. No golden garnishes or 12-dish spreads. Just clay bowls, cracked wooden spoons, and flavours built on patience, thrift and trust. Trust in fermentation. Trust in the seasons. Trust in the idea that you don't need much to make something last. You help slice a final dish, chwinamal, a mountain herb sautéed with garlic and soy sauce. It smells wild and a little stubborn. You taste it and feel like you've licked a hillside. Somehow it's wonderful. The meal closes with a small handful of pine nuts and dried jujubes. No ceremony, just a quiet nod that says, "That'll do." You sit on a low bench as night wraps around the village. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. The smell of smoke clings to your sleeves. Your belly is full but not heavy. Your mind quiets like a pot cooling on the coals. Peasant food, they say. But you've never felt richer. Night deepens, and a certain mischief stirs in the air. The kitchen, dimly lit by oil lamps and fire embers, hums with a quieter rhythm, now less bustling, more brooding. It's time to explore the stranger side of seasoning, the side that tickles your curiosity and threatens your nose. Enter jiotgal, fermented seafood condiments. These aren't sauces in the polite Western sense. They're ancient, unapologetically bold little dishes made from shrimp oysters or whole baby crabs salted and left to transform in clay jars until they achieve, well, an acquired taste. You're handed a tiny porcelain dish containing seiujo, tiny pinkish shrimp fermented in salt. The smell punches first. Briny, pungent, alive in a maybe too much kind of way. You brace yourself and take a nibble. It's salty. So salty. But there's a rich umami backnote that unfurls like a secret recipe whispered by the ocean itself. It clings to your tongue and to your pride. Someone pats your back in sympathy. Then comes ganjang-gajang, raw, blue crab marinated in soy sauce, garlic and sesame oil. Locals call it rice thief because it makes you eat more rice than you ever planned. You're sceptical until you suck the marinated flesh from a claw and feel the sharp tang of the sea mellowed by the deep earthiness of aged soy. You blink, then go back for more. And finally brace yourself, gajang, the spicy cousin. Crabs again, but now drenched in chili paste, garlic sugar and ginger. In our pre-chili medieval setting, the version is milder, likely peppered with mustard seed, garlic chive, or even Sancho pepper for heat. Historians still argue whether early forms of gajang used spice for flavour or preservation. Some suggest regional variation. Others believe it evolved as trade routes introduced new seasonings. What's clear is that fermented seafood played a vital role in preserving protein-enhancing plain grains and punching up winter diets when fresh vegetables vanished. You sample a tiny bite of marinated pollock intestines. You regret that choice, and yet, not entirely. Someone offers you a bowl of rice with a dab of yorugul giot, young oysters fermented with chives, and thin slivers of green plum. The combination is tangy, oily, oddly floral. You take another bite, then another, Somewhere in the background, a cat stares at you, eyes wide, possibly judging. Even kimchi gets a glow up tonight. You're handed a type called Beck Kimchi White. Kimchi unspiced, seasoned with fruit pine nuts, and sometimes a trace of fish brine. It's crisp, gently sour, and utterly unlike its fiery descendant. Refreshing, almost polite. As you nibble your way through what feels like a tasting menu for adventurous monks, the air thickens with stories. A cook tells you how soldiers once carried jars of jiotgal into battle, using them to flavour foraged rice and hide the scent of slightly off meat. Another recalls how certain jiot dishes were banned in temples during fasting seasons, not because they were luxurious, but because they were too appetizing. One young apprentice shares a family legend that his great-great-grandmother's crab sauce once won a magistrate's favour, and possibly his heart. You're not sure if that last part's true, but your lips are still tingling from the crab, so maybe. You move on to the safer corner of the table, buchujot, fermented garlic chives, chopped fine, and left to mellow with anchovy brine. Spread over warm rice, it's sharp, herbaceous, and strangely addictive. It tastes like late summer and long walks through overgrown gardens. The room has grown more relaxed. Laughter echoes softly. Someone opens a jar of pickled radish that smells so strong it temporarily clears your sinuses. No one flinches. No one. You sip on a warm barley tea, letting your palate reset. Outside, the wind rustles the thatched roof. Inside, someone sneezes violently after sniffing a spoonful of salted skate. You're told that's normal. That fish, you learn, is Hongeo Ho fermented stingray, beloved by some, feared by many. Tonight's kitchen hasn't dared make it, but the very idea prompts tales of tearful guests and nose-pinching nobles. You're relieved. No Hongeo, not tonight. Instead, you're handed a slice of pickled perilla, root, earthy and bitter, but mellowed by years of love. It's the final bite of the fermented odyssey. You chew slowly, aware that no dish tonight was made in less than a week, some in months. These were flavours built over time. Buried, stirred, watched, waited on. Flavours that dared to go sour, sharp and strange, then came back better for it. You set down your bowl gently, full, a little overwhelmed, and secretly wondering what else they've got fermenting out back. The moon is high now, brushing the treetops in slow, silver strokes. Most of the kitchen has quieted, but one small clay lamp still flickers near a worn stack of scrolls and a cluster of bowls that don't seem to belong to dinner. These are the medicine bowls. You ease closer and find yourself at a different kind of preparation table, the kind that stirs with root powders instead of batter, that boils petals instead of broth. Tonight, you'll be tasting recipes that tiptoe between food and remedy. The first is pine pollen cake. Yes, really. Made from carefully gathered yellow dust shaken from pine cones in spring, mixed with honey and rice flour, then steamed into soft golden rounds. You bite into one and immediately taste something airy, slightly floral, with a faint dryness that feels like breathing in a clean forest. It's considered good for the lungs, you're told. Also for impressing visitors who respect novelty. A woman nearby crushes something with a mortar and pestle. You peek in, it's dried omija berries. Again, this time not for tea, but for a cooling jelly eaten in summer to soothe nerves. You dip a finger in and taste. It's tart, vaguely medicinal, and you kind of like it. Then there's samgyetang ginseng chicken soup, traditionally made with a whole young chicken, glutinous rice garlic jujube, and a thick finger of ginseng roots stuffed inside like a secret. It's simmered until the chicken yields the rice blooms and the broth turns a pale, healing gold. You're served a small bowl and told to sip slowly. It smells like warmth. It tastes like resolve. Historians still argue whether samgyetang began as a common cold remedy or a summer stamina booster. Either way, the balance of protein, herbs and mild seasoning makes it an enduring favourite even today. Next up, deer antler tonic. You blink. Yes, actual deer antler, shaved dried, boiled and strained into a dark, slightly bitter liquid, sometimes mixed with honey or plum. It's considered invigorating. You're told it's good for aging knees, low energy, and impressing your in-laws. You take a respectful sip. It tastes like something that requires faith. But not everything here is wild. A bowl of black garlic cloves arrives fermented for weeks until they turn soft, sweet, and savoury. Eaten as is, or mashed into a paste, they are mellow, luxurious, and supposedly good for circulation. You eat 2, possibly 4. You stop counting after someone nods approvingly. There's also Baek kimchi again, this time served with slices of Asian pear and pine nuts, a combination used to cool the body and support digestion. It's crisp, juicy, and miles away from the fiery versions that would come later in culinary history. In another corner, mugwort soup simmers in a bronze pot. Mugwort suk is a deeply green, slightly bitter herb known for cleansing properties and vivid dreams. The broth is murky rich and slightly grainy. You take a spoonful. It tastes like memories from someone else's childhood. A child near the hearth is offered jujube paste on a rice cracker. It's sweet, sticky, and laced with ginger. She grins with purple-stained teeth. You're offered one too. The warmth of the ginger spreads across your chest like a gentle exhale. Then there's mai jakwa, a medicinal cookie technically. Deep-fried, twisted ribbons of dough glazed with ginger syrup, and often made during ancestral rites. Crisp on the outside, chewy within, with a spiced warmth that lingers. You eat one. You feel deeply honoured. You eat another. You feel mildly sugared. A small scroll is unrolled beside you showing diagrams of seasonal health regimens. It pairs foods with organs, flavours with elements, ailments with root powders. It's medicine, but in edible form. The cook beside you nods sagely. Eat when it's hot. Avoid greed in cold months. Never underestimate rice. You nod back. This feels like wisdom. Historians often note that medieval Korean food culture blurred the line between sustenance and healing. Recipes weren't just designed to fill the belly, but to balance the body. Cooling heat, drying, damp, calming wind. Whether or not you believe in the humours or the seasons of the spleen, you can't deny that every dish tonight felt intentional. You sit now with a bowl of warm rice porridge, steeped in jujube, and ginger dusted with crushed walnut. It's soft, smooth, slightly sweet. The kind of food you could eat every morning and never get tired. The cook adds one final drop of honey and says, to keep dreams soft. You believe her. The night is deep now, velvety, and still the kind that slows your heartbeat just by existing. The kitchen glows with the last of its embers, the world quiet but not empty. You wander outside for a moment, where a breeze plays in the pine trees, and a few stars blink lazily overhead. And it's here, standing beneath the faint outline of the moon, that you begin to imagine a very different world than the one you came from. A world without gas burners, refrigerators, or 10-minute delivery apps. A world where food meant gathering, preserving, waiting, and remembering, where flavour was coaxed, not demanded. You're still chewing on a pine nut from that last medicinal dish, when someone beside you says, "Do you think our ancestors would like Korean barbecue?" You turn. It's the cook, the one who taught you how to flip scallion pancakes and not to cry over fermented crab. She repeats, like real KBBQ. The kind with table grills and dipping sauces and sizzling strips of unmarinated beef cut so thin you can see tomorrow through them. You smile. Maybe. And just like that, you're imagining it, Goryeo nobles sitting in plastic chairs under restaurant awnings, delicately fanning the grill. Buddhist monks carefully folding lettuce wraps with soybean paste and grilled garlic. A peasant woman, head tilted thoughtfully, dipping brisket into sesame oil and salt. A royal scribe taking notes on how to properly layer perilla, leaf, chili and short rib. Would they approve, you ask? Historians still argue about that, she replies. Some say the ancestral palate was too delicate. Others believe they'd be delighted by how far rice and jang have come. You both chuckle, then fall quiet, letting your minds paint an anachronistic mural of medieval figures in neon-lit barbecue joints. The cook offers one final snack, a grilled rice cake, brushed with honey, and soy sauce, slightly charred at the edges. You take a bite. It's chewy, sweet, smoky, modern, ancient, all at once. You sit back down inside, tucking yourself into the same corner of the kitchen that started your journey hours ago. A pot of barley tea simmers again. A small dish of pickled radish waits beside it. Someone snores gently nearby. You take one last look at the table before you. A mosaic of flavours, textures, and time. Every dish from today, whether royal banquet or countryside porridge, had something quietly astonishing to say. Not loudly, not boastfully, but with the steady assurance of food that knows it was built to last. Because the truth is, none of it was boring. Not the seaweed sheets or mung bean jellies, not the acorn porridge or medicinal roots, not even the fish sauce with questionable opinions. It was all memory, history. A conversation still happening across wooden tables and warm stone floors. You sip your barley tea. You lean back against the wall. And you let it all settle in. So now as the fire fades and the dishes sleep in their stacks, you can feel the story of medieval Korean food begin to blur gently at the edges. The sharp salt of the jeotgal. The creamy heat of ginseng. The surprising tenderness of acorn jelly. All of it floats like steam in your memory, soft and low. Let your breath slow down with the rhythm of this kitchen, unhurried, undemanding. There's no need to stir anything more. No bowls to scrub, no sauces left to age. Only the glow of lantern light flickering against the walls and the subtle scent of roasted barley curling in the air. Imagine the heavy wooden door creaking open to the night. Cool wind brushing your cheeks. The sound of a pot lid settling into place. Imagine curling into a warm quilt tucked with the scent of pine needles and grain. Let your muscles melt like porridge over a low flame. Let the details fall away like crumbs from the edge of a pancake. Nothing to remember. Nothing to fix. Only the taste of time, slow and careful, wrapped in sesame and soy. And if you drift into dreams tonight, of foraging for spring herbs, flipping chewy pancakes, or quietly out eating a scholar at a royal banquet, well, you've earned it. The food remembers you. Sleep deeply, traveller, and thank you for joining me tonight.